Govinda Jai Gopala Jai Jaya Hare Om Gopala Krishna Govinda Jai Gopala Jai Jaya Gopala Krishna Govinda Jai Gopala Jai Jaya Om Hare Om Radha Krishna Om Hare Om Rama Radha Om Hare Om Bala Shiva Om Hare Om Rama Sita.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call New Age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
I could actually hear us clashing in my headphones. It was not good. As you may have guessed, this episode we'll be talking about the Hare Krishna movement.
Kat's just back from 3 weeks living in a Krishna community in Germany, which is why her chanting is so much easier on the ears than mine.
Not sure about that. I think we both need some practice there.
So Hare Krishnas are, well, they're sometimes called ISKCON, which is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's basically an outgrowth of a Hindu sect devoted to Krishna. So, as you probably know, the Hindu pantheon is huge. There's loads of different gods in there. But Krishna is kind of a young, handsome male god. In fact, Krishna means all attractive. So that's where that word comes from. And he usually has blue skin, sometimes black or purple skin, is usually represented as a teenage boy, and he's kind of a prankster god. He's often playing the flute, and he's associated with cows and milkmaids. And they're the ones, you've probably seen them in orange robes, or at least maybe you did in the 80s, singing Dancing with Cymbals and singing the song we just sang. And their main thing is praising Krishna and telling other people about how great he is. At least that's my layperson's understanding. But this was Kat's idea for an episode, so what made you want to go stay with the Krishnas?
Yeah, so I guess I did know about Hare Krishnas from, I guess, my youth. You know, to me, they were the people in the robes who dance in the streets and give you flowers. And I kind of saw them as, well, like I kind of saw them as like human Pokemon. You know, in the fact that Pokemon say their name. Do you know what I mean? So Pokemon that say their name the whole time, like Pikachu, and just like the Hare Krishna say Hare Krishna. It's adorable. So the Hare Krishna Pokemon I was like aware of, but it wasn't until my yoga teacher training where I was introduced to Bhakti Yoga, which is that division of Hinduism, I guess, that the Hare Krishna movement has come from. And I was intrigued by it because it's so heart-centered. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's devotion to Krishna. And I'm quite aware that I'm a bit more on the cold-hearted side of things. So it was just like a path that I was interested in. But yeah, I hadn't invested any serious time into it. Came across it again more recently as I've been studying astrology under the tutelage of a devotee or a Bhakta person, so who's on that path.
Oh, really? Your astrology teacher is a Hare Krishna?
He's a Hare Krishna, I guess. I don't know if... I don't think that the word would be used in that way, but let's say it's the Bhakti Yoga path. And coincidentally, while looking for a community to do some volunteering this year, which I've been doing a lot of, I found this place, Golokadharma, a Hare Krishna temple in southwest Germany. They described... I'm going to read out like a bit of their listing. So we're an international spiritual, in brackets, Hare Krishna, rural living community. There are on average 15 to 25 international people of various ages living here. We help people to become the best versions of themselves through spiritual education, so daily morning classes on Vedic texts and weekly meetings on spiritual topics, mental health and fitness, weekly yoga and mantra meditations, and a regulated natural lifestyle with vegetarian/vegan diet. And I like this. It was a super friendly...
Sounds good.
Yeah, it was a super friendly listing. And the response I got from the president was really lovely. And just a little aside, every time he would sign off his name as Gaura Haridas, which at the time I was like, well, it's Gaura Hari his first name and Das is his surname. So like if I reply like hello, do I reply hello Gaura? Do I reply? So I basically never called him his name. And there are just lots of little things that you kind of get, I got hung up on throughout this whole process. But anyway, when I read that, I thought, why not? Seem friendly. It's fodder for the podcast. It'll help me understand my astrology teacher a bit better. And good food, as we know about the Hare Krishnas, they give you good free food. So
yeah, that's kind of what they're famous for.
I mean, that's kind of what you told me. So I went there like basically under that impression. And I mean, it's definitely it's a small part of it when you're there. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe we have like feasts like every other day. So yeah, I guess that was part of it. So the place itself, beautiful surroundings. You're basically in a forest, and they have these temples all over the world. So you're going to get like a strange little combination of like Indian culture in whatever tradition, not tradition, whatever culture you go to. So like my place, it wasn't quite India, it wasn't quite Germany, it was this other thing.
Well, that's a really interesting mix. I just wanted to say before we get into your experience what my thoughts and feelings were, because they're the most important part of the podcast.
Oh no,
about you going off, because this is kind of a big deal. I didn't really know much about, apart from the food. Like I traveled the world as a vegetarian and then as a vegan, so going to the Hare Krishna restaurants is great for me because I can eat there, and the people seem super friendly, and sometimes I've seen them wandering around singing and dancing, although it seems like that was a much more common thing back in the 80s, which was before I was old enough to see Hare Krishnas on the streets. But I do see them occasionally in Brighton, in the town where we live. And my main experience of Krishna in general was going to temples in India. And that is completely different from what I saw, like the Hare Krishnas I saw in the UK, because the Krishna temples aren't specifically for Hare Krishnas, they're for everyone. So Hindus of all different stripes who have one favorite god over the others, or who worship them all equally, or whatever, come to these temples. But mainly,
it's Vaishnavism. So that I think that's what they would call them, or like Vaishnavism.
Oh,
like yeah. So that's kind of like
that's people who are into
worship
all of the gods.
No, like Vishnu, but like Krishna as Vishnu as an avatar of Krishna. So
yeah, it's really interesting talking to Hindu people, because they all have different perspectives on it, whether they see all the gods as aspects of Brahma, or whether they see them all as individuals, or whether they see them more as like mythological stories.
Yeah.
It's hard. I guess it's a massive religion, and it's very, very old, so it's not surprising that it's complex. But the main people that I saw at the Krishna temples in India were young women looking for love.
Yeah.
Like it was the place to go if you were, I guess because he's a young, attractive male god, if you're looking for a partner, and they would go in little groups, and they'd all be giggling together and having a really good time, and it seemed like a really sort of fun picnic.
Well, that's...
So I was feeling quite positive when you said you were off to see Hare Krishna. I was like, oh, you know, these people seem absolutely lovely and completely benign. But then I went to a Skeptics in the Pub event, and I mentioned that you were off to join the Hare Krishnas for a month. And the other skeptics at the event were like, really? Why? Yeah, they sort of started to make me feel a little bit more worried than I were. And on the way to this event, I was reading a book because I was just like, oh, I'll pick up any book about the Krishnas and see what's going on. And the first one that came when I searched for non-religious books, because there's obviously a lot of books published by Krishnas, but I wanted something that was secular, was Mad After Krishna, My Life in a Destructive Cult by Paul Ford. So I read the first couple of chapters to that, which were concerning. And then I spoke to the skeptics, and then I messaged you saying something like, I hope you're not getting enough sleep. Do you remember that?
Okay, fair enough.
The reason I sent that was because in this book, Mad After Krishna, he talks about not getting very much sleep, and we've just read this book about how important sleep is. What's it called?
Oh, yeah, I remember Why We Sleep. But I do remember
Why We Sleep.
I do remember that message, and I remember just thinking that was meant for somebody else. I didn't realise it was so like out of place that I didn't even that I'll talk about the sleep hygiene for sure.
I was just trying to ask I was trying to ask a gentle question that would give me an idea of how well you were doing, because I was starting to get a little bit worried, and I realised I was being a bit paranoid, but still. So on the way back from the Skeptics in the Pub event, I thought, fine, I'll just listen to a podcast about Hare Krishnas. That'll be good research, and I'm sure it won't be as, upsetting or worrying as this book. So I type in, Hare Krishna into my podcast provider thing, what they call Podcatcher. Yeah. And I come up with The Hare Krishna Murders, American Scandal. It's like a 7-part series about this horrible murders that happen surrounding the Krishnas. And then you text me a picture of yourself in a sari. And I'm like, no! So I didn't want to be that like worrying mum figure in your life who was like asking loads of questions, but I must admit I was very relieved when you texted me and said you were ready to leave now. Yeah. Yeah. At the end of your stay. But alleviate my worries. Tell me about the experience.
Okay, so, as I said, the place itself was beautiful. There's basically, in this particular setup, there was a main building containing the ashram. So, like, the more spiritual people would be staying there. There was a kitchen in there, a temple room, which was just like a big, well, kind of like a small hall with at one end you have Prabhupada, who I'll talk about in a bit, as like a big statue of like a bald man, who's at one end of the temple, and at the other end of the temple you have all the Krishna stuff, all the deities, lots of flowers, like really visually exciting stuff. And then there is the prasad room, which, I mean, really it's the dining room, but because everything you eat there becomes prasad, or food that's offered to Krishna and actually technically becomes Krishna, that's what you call it. Oh,
like transubstantiation.
It is, exactly. And I just kept kind of comparing it to that. I mean, I was making a lot of like comparisons to other religions, and mostly Catholicism, because, I found that was one of the many things which I thought was interesting.
In my mind, prasad is that in Hindu temples they have these little things. They're like
little sweets.
They're like Rice Krispies that have gone stale. They're like really sugary little rice things that they put down. And I've been to a couple of temples where they have serious problems with monkeys coming and like wrecking up the place to steal these, because they don't respect the fact that it's the food of the gods, or literally the body of the gods. They just want to get that sweet sugar.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine. There was also a separate kitchen, like a second kitchen, which was just for cooking for the deities. And by deities, I mean little statues that are also representing Krishna and actually are Krishna, because everything is like Krishna. So that was interesting. Like, you basically have to feed the dolls before you eat to make the food holy. So that was interesting. And I stayed in a dorm in a separate building, which was a lot less fancy and kind of shitty. I do wish I'd asked. Yeah, I wish I'd asked to pay extra to stay in the guest house, which was a third building with more rooms, which would be very like luxurious. Like if you want to, well, kind of luxurious. If you would want to stay somewhere nice, I do recommend Glokodama's guest house. And yeah, I was sharing a room with like at one. Oh, it's free because I was working a few hours a day for them. So yeah, you can go as a volunteer. And pretty much everyone there seemed to be volunteering something. I think very few people would be paying anything at all. Yeah, so the people themselves, well, I guess there were some like different divisions. You had like the young devotees who were like young, like females in their 20s, a few men who might have been in their 20s or 30s, the older generation of people who might have been, you know, whatever, 50 plus. And then there were the other workaway or volunteer people. So it was me and 3 other girls at different times. So really, really multicultural. I mean, everyone there was from a different country. I think there was 1 or 2 Germans. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but not so many Germans. The actual real devotees, some had been initiated, so they had got their like special name, which was always really, really hard to remember. And then others were still kind of like somewhere in between, I guess. I noticed that you mentioned the orange robes at the beginning, but for the most part, men tend to be wearing white robes or saris, I guess. Can you call is a male's sari a sari? Is it the same thing?
I don't know. I've only ever heard sari used to refer to the women's
exactly
thing, but I guess a man can wear a sari, so I don't see why not.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe let's call them robes, but I'm sure there's another name for it. And the women were all wearing very colourful saris, so really beautiful. It was a really nice aesthetic. I did speak to somebody about this at one point, and she was like, before I kind of even commented or really asked any questions, she was like, it's not like an Indian thing, it's a spiritual thing. So that was like an interesting thing. She was kind of like defending, and I really, really like this girl. I really respected her opinions. And she was basically saying, you know, this isn't, it's not cultural appropriation. This is an acknowledgement of the spiritual belief that we're all behind. And I must say that the day that I spent in Asari, you do become a bit more like considerate about what you're there for, and you do feel special, and you feel like you're part of a club. It's a really good feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what uniforms do in a way, don't they? They bring you together. If you're wearing the same clothes as everyone else or the same style as everyone else, it defines group identity. Yeah.
But yeah, I will talk about this one particular devotee as a good example of somebody who was just like, just so lovely. She was genuinely dedicated to Krishna. She was my age. She was Russian. She'd got into the Hare Krishna community, I think, 19. So she'd already been in it for a long time. But she would be really helpful in trying to kind of educate me. But it never felt forceful. It just felt like that's all she can talk about. It's so like in her heart and in her head. That's all she's got. So she would take the time to send me articles. And she taught me and my roommate from Mexico how to chant japa, which I will be teaching you shortly. And we had a lovely, mantra session on this lovely bridge. And we also took part in this routine of, apparently this is a thing, but you basically read from this book called Krishna Book out loud before bed. So the 3 of us would like take turns reading. And it's also recommended to do this whilst drinking warm milk, which I think is just the sweetest thing. And when you do it, like, I basically, I'd like to invite, you to, like, just take a book and, like, read it together with somebody. There's just something really nice about reading a book out loud. Yeah, I've done that.
It's a really lovely thing. Yeah, I read a lot of... it was really, when I was a kid, my parents read the C.S. Lewis books, the Chronicles of Narnia, to me. And when I first got together with my husband, I read most of them to him before bed. And it's a lovely way to bond with someone, yeah.
That's so nice. Yeah, I felt the same. I mean, if you read to kids, that's quite a nice thing as well. But I didn't know it would also work for adults. So anyway, so that was pretty much it. Like I said, the other girls...
What's in the Krishna book, though? What are you reading?
the pastimes of Krishna. So there's this word pastimes, which gets used a lot. And when you first hear it, it's like, that's a strange word to be using. But that's like, it is literally like how Krishna was spending his time. And especially when he was a baby. So like that image of like a little blue baby, that really stuck with me. And it's really grating. What's a better word for it? It's just different from when you grow up in the Catholic Church. Your image of God might be, an old white man in the clouds, or maybe Jesus, who a youngish man, but you don't see like a little blue baby. I mean, I guess you see baby Jesus as well, but to have all of these stories about this little blue baby running around and stealing ghee and like just getting into all kinds of scrapes, that's like a big part of the scriptures, and it's important.
So he's not perfect. He's not,
No.
doing everything right. He's like or is it almost like a Greek god? Is that sort of similar?
He's not like fucking up in that sense. It's kind of like he's he might be doing like cheeky things, but and he'll get kind of punished for it. Like Mother Yasoda will try to tie him up, but I read about it recently, and it's kind of like Krishna apparently likes being thought of as an equal. He likes getting involved, and his devotees almost forgetting. I mean, Mother Yasoda is meant to have forgotten that Krishna was Krishna, and she's just going to treat him like her son. But yeah, it's really, there's a lot of things that really don't make a lot of sense on the surface of it, but there's usually always some kind of reasoning behind it.
Do they believe that these stories literally happened, or are they like mythological?
Yeah, no, they believe they happened. Everything's pretty literal, as far as I know. Yeah, I heard this great talk this morning. So at one point, I'll talk about the daily schedule in a bit, but at one point a woman, a great kind of guru teacher lady, a Miller, came, and she was great because she's like from New York, so she had this really like hilarious edge to her that you don't expect from somebody who's like highly spiritual. But she was telling a story about the creation story, which this is going to be a very short and probably wrong version of it, but basically Vishnu as Krishna kind of like lies down, and a lotus grows out of his belly button, and from that like Brahma comes out, and he's got like 4 faces or something, and then like the world gets created. It's crazy. Like all creation stories are crazy, but she made the point that so are the scientific ones. Like it's crazy to think that there was this before space and time, which is crazy. There was this like infinitely small, infinitely dense point, which is also crazy. Like all creation stories, you have to suspend belief because it's beyond our rational mind. Anyway, so there's
that's true. So, it's kind of like it's, as you say, it's beyond. It's something that we can't imagine because it's before everything that we think of reality was created. So
yes,
but we do. I mean, the difference is obviously that there are. I mean, I don't know much about the beginning of the universe, but I believe that the scientists who speculate about it are drawing on observations of the actual world, like scientific observations about the world, and putting that story together, saying, well, it probably happened this way based on our research and our experiments and our observations. Whereas I'm not sure that can be said of more religious creation stories. Yeah.
I mean, if you believe in God as your like foundation, then of course you're going to believe in everything that God told you about how the earth got created. That's a pretty good reason to believe in something. But these are the kind of discussions I was having a lot with people. Particularly there was a girl who was neither, she was very spiritual, but she'd kind of come from a different path, which is called Advaita Vedanta or something like that, which is a more impersonal God. So I'll talk about the beliefs in a little bit, but it's God isn't this little blue baby or this blue man. It's consciousness. And that's still like a Hindu belief system. There are Hindus who believe in an impersonal God, and you can argue about that until the cows come home. It's a funny reference because cows are a big deal, as you know there. And so we had some really great conversations, and it was interesting to see how our perspective shifted over the 3 weeks that I was there. Like, the longer you're there, the more you can kind of, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I can see why you'd want a personal God and all of this stuff. But more on that with the beliefs. I was just
that guy Paul Ford, who wrote the Mad After Krishna book, he said something at the beginning of the book that really resonated with me. Just he was getting into the whole Hare Krishna thing, which is, if everyone else in a group believes something, then soon you will too. Yeah, kind of like how beliefs can sort of permeate you, kind of like osmosis. They can just get into you. And I thought it was a really observant way to describe how that happens.
Well, and that's actually part of the tradition. It's this idea that you're meant to associate with devotees in order to become closer to Krishna. And that was like drilled into me from the early on, because I was like, oh my God, that's so true. I mean, that's objectively true. The longer you spend with these people, of course, you're going to start believing it more. And that's like how it's meant to work. Yeah. Anyway.
That's interesting. And that is kind of nice because it's community, but it also has like a sinister edge, especially when you're reading it in the book with a title like the one I just told you.
I'm sure. So the daily life, coming back to the sleep thing. So proper devotees are meant to wake up at 4 or before 4, before the sun rises, basically, because it's the most, I think I heard this at one point, it's the most sattvic time of the day. And basically, without getting too much into it, there are 3 modes of like the material world. Have you heard about these? The gunas?
No.
Basically like the sattvic or sattva is, the nicest, most spiritual or balanced time of the day. And then Raja is like, or Rajas, is that how you say it? That's like the most fiery, passionate time of the day. And that kind of kicks in at around 8 a.m. And then in the evening, everything becomes tamasic again, which is like lazy and like ignorant, which basically describes how I feel on a daily basis. Like, I do like the early morning because it does feel the most like clear and calm. And then by about 8 or 9, like after I've had whatever, coffee or whatever, then you do get a bit more active. And in the evening, you just want to watch Netflix. So anyway, that's the idea.
I guess it depends what kind of chronotype you are, right? Because I'm the same. Like, I'm a very early morning person, but I guess for other people, they would not find that very comfortable at all.
I did bring that up with somebody. I kind of said, like, yeah, I'm all for this kind of schedule. But interestingly, I have known people who are, without a question, they can really only function in the evening and can do like their most creative work very late at night. And how can you just like ignore that percentage of the population? Anyway. So this is how the day went.
Apparently, what's his name? Prabhupada? What's his name?
Okay, so let's Prabhupada.
Yeah. So I read that he said devotees are lucky to take 6 hours of sleep a night, and he got by on 2 to 4 hours. Yeah. So like all these things, like if the leader has a particular way of functioning, they kind of, everyone aspires to function in that same way.
Right, like Tony Robbins.
So maybe he was an early chronotype.
Yeah, exactly. I can see that. So yeah, you start by a bit of Mangala Arati, which is deity worship, singing songs, and glorifying the spiritual master, which I think they glorify Prabhupada, I think. And then you've got about 5 a.m, you start listing the 10 offences of the holy name, which remind us, not to be bad. And then you start glorifying the plant, tulsi, or holy basil, which is a very dear plant to the Lord. And I believe it's so potent that she can bestow pure devotion to Krishna. So you need. Is
this like normal basil, or?
It's holy basil.
Do you literally have a basil plant in front of you?
No, it's holy basil. It's a different type of plant.
Oh, I see. Okay. But does it taste? It's not like that Thai basil that's kind of like you put in curries. It's a whole different thing.
Maybe it is like that. I don't know. I did have to eat some.
You didn't get to taste any?
I did. Yeah. So you. Oh God, that was funny. That was terrible. So I did go up to sort of take some because everyone was doing it, and I had to make sure, like, are you meant to eat this? And she was like, yes, eat it. Like, obviously, a lot, because you don't want to like eat something that I just accidentally ate some Krishna that I wasn't meant to eat. And then you do some more prayers at 5:30 a.m. That's when you, as a group, do the japa. So this is like chanting, and I have my beads here. I got convinced to buy a basically you have a bead bag. I'm sure it has another name. It's like a pouch. It's kind of shaped like a cotton balloon, and inside it you keep your beads, which have 108 beads plus one Krishna bead. Have you heard of these?
Oh, I have heard of them. Is the Krishna bead like a different color or something?
No, it's not, but it does have like a I'm hoping to get the sound effects on recorded. It has like a little extra nubbin, I would say, attached to it. So you can't miss the Krishna bead. You can't
miss the Krish.
Anyway, so the idea is that you you chant one round of the Maha mantra, which is what we were singing at the beginning. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, on each bead. And then you're meant to do that at least 16 times. So I would say that one round takes up to like at least 10 minutes, I would say. And
wow.
times 16, you're there for over 2 hours. And that's what, that is the kind of mad part that I just couldn't really wrap my head around, but it is really crucial. It's probably, if not one of the most important things. So yeah.
Do you have to do it all in one go, or can you split it up throughout the day?
It's recommended, if you can, do it all in one go in the morning. But also Prabhupada did say, he showed mercy apparently and said like, you can split it up. This is an interesting thing. So I have comfortably been able to do 4, which is like 40 minutes of meditation, which is unheard of for me. I literally would never be able to make myself sit for 40 minutes in the morning, ever. And even since leaving, I've still been doing that. So I do think there is something, I think it's a really solid mantra for meditation, in a way that just like silent meditation, I struggle with a lot. And I did have a...
Yeah, I really like mantra meditation as well. Even if I'm only just repeating it in my head, I find it's good to have something to focus on.
Yes. And I did have a conversation with a British guy there, who... It was just funny because he was like a proper bloke, like he had like a scarred face. He was from Leicester, so it's quite funny to see how this attracts.
That's your definition of a proper bloke. Scars from Leicester.
Well, I don't know how else to describe him without like offending anyone or whatever. But he was saying how there is something magical about the mantra. It's transcendental. It is Krishna, and so there's a lot of conversation about that. And then he was saying how, it would be physically impossible to replace the mantra with something else. Like you wouldn't be able to chant Coca-Cola for 2.5 hours. And I was like, I think if you wanted to, you could. And I kept thinking about you. And I was like, I bet if I asked Rebecca to do this, she would like physically be able to do it.
You should have asked me. I would definitely be able to chant Coca-Cola for 2 hours. I don't even drink Coca-Cola.
I mean, you can choose... Yeah, it has to be something, maybe it has to be something meaningless as well. Otherwise it probably would carry something of the holy name. But since then, and trying to do it even 4 rounds, I don't think it would be possible to do it with everything. I think it's maddeningly difficult to spend that long.
I think there are probably certain words that have a sort of a nice beat to them, a nice rhythm to them that are different enough so that you can keep. I'm sure it's not literally anything you could do, but I don't think there's anything because there's the Om Mani Padme Hum Buddhist chant, and I've heard mantras, just secular mantras that I use when I meditate, and they work perfectly well. I think there's something very calming, and it's almost like, I don't know, like hypnotizing, like to just say the same words again and again. It sort of it cuts out any of the mental chatter. So I think maybe not any words would work, but I think more than just those specific syllables of Hare Krishna.
Well, what I like about the Maha chant is that like you can get it wrong quite easily, even though it's like only 3 words repeated, over 16 words. It's like I can ultimately, I found myself saying like happy Christmas like you will start saying other words and realize that you're not paying attention. So the power of it to bring you back to your focus is good. Anyway, there would be more singing. So I never went to those early sessions. One day I came in at about 7:15, where there were some like prayers and more worship to Prabhupada. We actually would face Prabhupada and like the statue, this like shiny statue. And that was really beautiful.
Is this a life-size statue?
Yeah. So it really does look like there's some like Indian blokes sitting at the back of the room. It's amazing. And it was just really amazing to watch the other people, especially the men, because I mean the men are on one side of the room and the women are on the other, which, you know, we can discuss that in a bit, but just like you are seeing pure devotion, and it's really like a pleasant thing to witness. And then after that you've got some class, and this is my favorite thing. I missed very few of these. I always attended class, and this was basically a reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is one of their main texts, and actually it's 12 volumes, like 12 fat volumes.
Wow.
Yeah. And like I can't even imagine. I've just started the first one and it's a lot. And that
where does it come from? Who wrote it?
Yeah, interesting story. So Prabhupada says it's 5,000 years old. And he kind of, there's a big, I mean, I've just read a load about who wrote it, and it was just, it's such a long and to me non-interesting story that I can't remember it, even though I just read it. But it's, you know, it's all about like passing this on. But
it's not just a normal Hindu text. It's a specific thing to Hare Krishna.
No, I think, okay, a couple of things that I have kind of like lodged in my mind is that it's written by devotees. It's not written by Krishna, whereas the Bhagavad Gita is written by Krishna. You've heard of the Bhagavad Gita?
Okay. Yes, of course.
Well, yeah, and some of the audience might not have, but it's basically about a battle. Pretty big deal. And then this one,
it's a pretty big deal.
I don't want
like
to
one of the key texts of Hinduism.
I don't want to attempt to like, you know, summarize it. So then,
yeah, I know what you mean. It's a difficult subject because we're talking about Hare Krishna, but like we don't have the time or space to go into the details of Hinduism. But that's all the background for this discussion. So go look on the Wikipedia for Hinduism if you're interested, people.
Right, and I would actually recommend reading these books because I think, regardless of like what you take from it, I think there's stuff to be taken from all of these. I'm finding anyway. But this one, what was I going to say? So I heard that it was like the cream of the Upanishads. Like this is the best bits, and that's still 12 massive volumes long, which is hilarious. Anyway. The class was great. So what I really enjoyed there was you'd have the little verse to study and you would sing that, like it would be a call and response thing. So the teacher would be like, da, 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 you know, that's Sanskrit. And then you would repeat it. And then there would be like the translation of each of the words. So it's like really in depth. Like you're looking at literally 4 lines and really pulling a load of the stuff out. And Prabhupada actually translated all of these texts. So everything you read is Prabhupada's interpretation of it. And what they will be very quick to say is Prabhupada didn't make any of this up. There is none of him in his interpretations. He's just like a vessel, you know, he's just telling you what his teacher told him and what his teacher told him. So that lineage thing is like a really big deal, which I also think is quite common throughout the Hindu overall faith.
The idea of gurus passing down wisdom to each other and trying to connect it in a what they like to think is an unbroken line back to Krishna himself or to another one of the gods. That is it's a very popular idea.
Definitely. And then there was prasad. You get breakfast then. I spent most of my time.
What time is this? You're getting breakfast?
At 9. That's
quite late if you're getting up at 4.
Yeah, it's weird, but people like eat a shitload. So I was never even. You're never even that hungry. Like there is just so much food. For the most part, like maybe some days they'd get it a bit wrong and there wouldn't be so much. But anyway, you're not eating food. You're eating Krishna, and Krishna will sustain you. Anyway, what else? Wait
a minute, what's the food like? This is the most important question for me.
So breakfast was usually pretty much the same stuff. It's definitely not German. You're definitely getting stuff inspired by India. There are certain dishes like khichdi, which is like a really pleasant, flavorful mix of like, I guess, rice and vegetables in like a sauce. Not really a sauce. I guess it's just a broth. Anyway, there's that. Towards the end, we started getting oatmeal, which was really good. I just really missed oatmeal, and that was nice. Fruit, lots of fruit. And bread, like homemade. Oh, that was the German thing. There was like the German influence of this really like dense bread. And then lunch was big as well. So lunch would just be all different kinds of things. It varied. Like at some points we were getting nice fresh vegetables from the garden. They have a nice garden there. That was something that Prabhupada was big on, is like self-sustaining communities. And some places will have cows as well, but this place did not. And what else? Towards the end, we would have like more like fried food. Like just imagine Indian food. Oh, but without the spices, because a lot of the really spicy things are too rajas. So
rajas.
Yeah, remember that I talked about those gunas, the 3 modes: sattva, raja, and tamas. So you don't want to be too spicy, basically.
Do you have garlic?
No, garlic not allowed. Onions not allowed. Caffeine, nope. Chocolate, nope. So yeah, I learned to love carob.
Well, there's caffeine in chocolate, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a kind of caffeine. It's not the same caffeine as coffee.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
so there's wait a minute. So there's no caffeine, no meat eating, obviously, including fish and eggs.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about
the other rules.
The rules. Oh, I was going to talk about them later, but the other rules are there are 4 rules. So no meat, no intoxicants, and that's the one that includes the stimulants like caffeine, and no gambling, and no illicit sex. And I was like, what does illicit mean? And that's just sex outside marriage, just in case you didn't know, because I didn't know what that meant. Okay. So 4 simple rules, and plenty of other minor rules. Like, okay, so this is the thing. No one tells you the customs until you get something wrong. And this, yeah, so there were lots of little things. Like one of the duties was serving prasad. And sometimes you wouldn't have these big serving spoons. So, you know, if it was just a small thing, like, oh, there's some sauce here, I'll just reach over and use a regular spoon. And it's like, nope, you have to use the blessed spoons. And like, no one tells you that until you get it wrong. And even if you get it wrong, people kind of don't really say, they're like, oh God, you know, you just kind of get the stink eye. And this is quite common. And this is quite common because I heard Amila, the guru lady, talk about this, that she found this when she first got to the first time she ever stayed overnight in a temple. And this would have been back in like, I guess the 60s, 70s, that, you know, she made a garland of like flowers for the deity, and she didn't make it symmetrical. And they were like, nope, can't use it. It's not symmetrical. And just things like that. Like, if you're not told, how do you know how to do something? So didn't like that.
I would hate that. I like knowing what the rules are and how things are going to work. I hate that, like trying to second guess, because I'm not very good at reading people's social cues. So if someone was rolling their eyes as I used the wrong spoon, I probably wouldn't notice, and I'd just carry on using the wrong spoon.
Yeah, and the psychological effects can be something like, you know, you feel like you're on the outside, you feel shame. There are lots of like damaging psychological effects around that. That said, because I've been doing this volunteering thing for like several months now, I think I was a little bit more hardened than maybe some of the younger people might have been. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that has helped me.
Yeah, you've just got used to turning up in new places and figuring out like the rules as you go along.
Yeah, and fucking up. Yeah. So that was pretty much. Do you have any other questions about the experience?
Yeah, I wanted to know, like, when you chatted to people, what did they say their reasons were for joining in the first place?
It's a lot of curiosity. So, like, for example, the Russian girl, she just met some Hare Krishnas on the street in the Red Square. Like, this is not something that she would have come across at any other point in her life. But at that time in her life, she was looking for something. You know, I think it's somebody who they're already a seeker. Other people, like on the last day, I met a girl who's like from, you know, about 5 minutes away from where I grew up, which was neat. And she said that she had been raised Hindu, then found Christianity, and then found Hare Krishnas. And she said that there was a really smooth transition from Christianity into the Hare Krishnas, which I 100% agree with. I find that really fascinating as well. Other people
kind of makes
have
sense
been like
it's monotheistic, right?
Yes. And yeah, you've got that transubstantiation thing. I guess if that's, yeah. I mean, there are lots of things that feel quite like it's the right feeling. Anyway, it's a lot about like love, and Jesus did preach a lot about love. So there's that. So the other thing is just like people who'd been traveling. I mean, I wouldn't say like I had a lot in common, but I think personality-wise, you know, you can kind of get on with these people if you're already mildly interested in spiritual things and interested in like travel. Because actually, one of the things that you could do as a devotee is visit spiritual places. You're meant to go to Vrindavan, which is like the kind of hub in India for all of this fun. And yeah, I just think it's people who probably weren't. They were already looking for something, and it just they found this one first. Yeah.
And did you get a sense of how long they usually stayed with the group? Is it like people stayed living in the community for their whole lives, or did they like pop in and out?
I think it's quite an easy one to be a part of your whole life, because it's no big deal. Like if you want to be a householder, you know, you don't want to live in an ashram, you want to get married and have kids, like that's obviously fine. People are married in the communities as well, so you can raise kids there. I don't know the sort of attrition rate for devotees, because obviously I was only interested because
in that book, in the Mad After Krishna book, he said, and he's writing about a time when he was in the group, which was like I think 80s and early 90s. I can't remember exactly, but not now. But he said his sense after being in the group for a long time was that people stay 5 years or less on average, like living in community.
Well, I mean, obviously,
so I just wanted to see if that sounded right to you. Or
well, no, because there might have been a couple of people I met who were like, I've only been doing this for 2 years, and they were like already really sold on it. But everyone else had been in there for a long time.
Oh, so maybe their attrition rate has changed.
I mean, that's possible, but this is a small sample size as well. What I do think is that it's growing crazily. So just before I left, there was going to be a Krishna's birthday, so Janmashtami, I think, and that was going to attract maybe up to 300 people, about 200 to 300 people.
Wow!
At this tiny place, there had only been about 30 of us there up until that point. And, you know, every weekend... Oh, this is something interesting. Every weekend we have a Sunday feast. And so this is what kept happening to me as an aside. I would keep saying we, and my, like, volunteer friends would be like, Kat, you're pretending to be one of them now. So it's easily done. That's what I want to point out. It's very easy to feel like a part of this. And then,
so were you staying in like a room with other volunteers? You weren't.
Yeah.
You weren't staying in the same dorms as the devotees.
No. Other volunteers. So they weren't. And
did you feel like there was a big division between you and the devotees?
No. Yes and no. I'll get back to that. But I was just going to say about the Sunday feast, which was that would get about 60 people from like local, like random Southwest Germany. And I did hear somebody say, you know, a lot of people here just come for the free food. They're not really here for Krishna. So that's interesting. Anyway, yeah. So was there a division? Not between me and like some of the devotees were just so bloody nice. Like honestly, the best people I've met all year. That they did feel like there was no division, and you did feel like you could ask any questions, and they would be just thrilled to talk about Krishna. Then there were like a couple, and actually in particular, it was maybe 2 of the younger members and like 1 older woman who were just very quiet, very holier than thou in their behaviors. And maybe that was my interpretation, and that was something that I was kind of like chewing on the whole time. But it's a stark difference when you see everyone else who's so like just full of light and they just like radiate love. Honestly, that's how I felt about them. But of course there are going to be a few not bad apples. I don't think they were bad people. They just had that kind of like, I'm just floating around and doing my own thing. You're unclean because you're not a devotee. And actually one of them asked in one of the sessions, something like in one of the classes, like, yeah, so I just feel like why do I get kind of like annoyed with non-devotees? Like, why do I have a kind of like attitude around them? And I was like, oh, at least she's self-aware. Like, at least she knows what she's doing. Anyway.
And did the devotees have like a life outside the daily routine you've described? Were they like reading books or creating art or doing yoga, or was it just the routine?
I will say that some of them would complain that there just wasn't enough time or energy to do other stuff outside of that. That said,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I think this is one of the biggest problems, and I had to like give up. I thought I would be able to do some of my work. And even as like a non-devotee and not getting up at 4 a.m, you just kind of can't. It's just not the place for it. It's not even that you're working so hard. It's just like that there are things kind of happening all the time. You don't really have any of your private space. That is a downside. But I will say that one of the women who I really, really liked, her husband, who I think either had been a monk, or I don't know if you can be a monk and be married, but whatever. He was maybe my age or younger. They were sort of like mid to late 20s, and he had an online business, like coaching. So, and like I heard him discussing like online courses. So yeah,
wow.
Some people are managing to do stuff and definitely like make some cash. Yeah. Anything
so you were
else?
originally thinking of staying for a month, but you left after 3 weeks?
3 weeks. And my reason was, well, manyfold. I didn't feel like I had that privacy to introvert. I realised again how hard I need to have my own space. Even though I loved my fellow volunteers a lot, it was just a lot to live with 3 other girls. And also the internet was shitty, so I couldn't do any of my work, really. And then there was
quite impressed they had the internet at all, to be honest.
Oh, most centres, I heard that it was odd for a centre not to have a strong internet connection. Most places have
really?
Yeah, of course. Like, it's definitely not like, don't go into outside society. Oh, and like, we actually drove into Luxembourg one day, and, you know, we drove into the nearest town. Like, they weren't like stopping us from going out and living our own lives. But the other thing was like the festival, like the Krishna birthday thing. I thought this place cannot handle like how I would describe handling 200 to 300 guests. Surely that's impossible. So I kind of got scared of that and had to go.
Yeah, where were they even going to sleep?
Yeah, so there were some rooms, but that would maybe hold another like maybe 80 people, if that, and then everyone else would have to camp because the ground's quite nice. Yeah, God knows. But also just like eating and like serving everyone. I mean, it's hard to serve 60 people, let alone hundreds.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, you say you're still doing the chanting.
Yeah.
How did you feel after it all? Like, how do you feel it affected you? The experience of being there.
I think it's like it's completely started me on like a path of, I wouldn't say like I'm like I want to sign up and get my name and call myself a devotee, because I think I'm what they would call a mixed devotee, which is somebody who's like on the fence basically, and maybe still acting in a way that is hoping to kind of get something, whether it's like mind satisfaction from the knowledge of this stuff or like getting a little bit of a perk from Krishna. So what I've been doing since though,
Krishna perk.
Yeah, Krishna perks, they're great. I have continued the chanting. I've started reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, and like I'm curious, and I keep watching loads of these videos because the talks from these various spiritual teachers are amazing. Like, these are really wise people. I've just found like a load of, and you could find that from any religion. Like, I was also watching some stuff from this like Islamic guy the other day, and I thought that was really fascinating as well. So I just think religious content is really great for self-help. This show has already taken us to some strange places, literally and metaphysically, and we love making it for you.
If you enjoy listening and have $1 a month to spare, we'd appreciate your support on Patreon.
Patreon is a platform for supporting content creators like us.
If you pledge $1 a month, we'll spend it on boring things like hosting fees and audio equipment.
And fun things like psychic readings, crystal healing, ayahuasca retreats.
Yeah, we'll spend it on drugs.
There are lots of adventures we'd like to go on. So if you want us to go hunting for the Loch Ness Monster, visit a haunted castle or Area 51, you're going to have to chip in.
We think having conversations about this stuff, paranormal, spiritual, weird stuff, is really important, especially between people who don't agree. Having these experiences is fun, doing the research is interesting, but the most important thing is the conversations.
We hope listening to our podcast will inspire you to start talking to people you would normally dismiss as grumpy old skeptics.
Or flaky woo-woo seekers.
If you think these sorts of conversations are important too, you can support us on Patreon. And as a supporter, for as little as $1, you'll be able to vote on upcoming show ideas.
And if there's something you're desperate for us to look into, whether it's acupuncture or vampires, Patreon supporters' requests will always go to the top of our consideration list.
Find out more at patreon.com/Seeker-Skeptic. And that's Patreon spelt Patreon.
Okay, so whilst you were out chanting and dancing and gorging on prasad, I was researching the history of the Hare Krishna movement or Hare Krishna. Should I say Hare Krishna or Hare Krishna?
Hare Krishna.
I had so many of these questions to ask you when I was reading all this. That's the problem with reading about something. You don't know how to pronounce any of the words. So Forgive me when I say it was founded by Abhaya Karadvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, or, as we all know and love him, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada.
I would just say Shri. I think people just say Shri Prabhupada, but maybe it is Srila. I think it's just Shri. But let's say
Let's say Prabhupada.
Mr. Prab.
Mr. Prab. So this guy, Mr. Prab, he was a follower of the Gaudiya mission, and he was charged by the leader, his guru, to spread Krishna consciousness to the West. So he spent After having this mission laid out to him, he spent 30 years. He was also working as a sales executive for a pharmaceutical company. This is all back in India, translating the Bhagavad Gita, which is what we were talking about earlier. It's an epic Sanskrit scripture. It tells the story of all the gods. And in my mind, I haven't read it. I've read bits of it and seen bits of it acted out and paraphrased. But they seem to me like Greek or Roman deities. They're just they're very human, they're on Earth, they're interacting with humans in human form, getting into all sorts of scrapes, as Kat was saying earlier. So he started translating that, which took him 30 years, which is unsurprising, it's a big book. And then in 1959, he became a sannyasi. Sannyasi, does that sound right?
Yeah, that does sound right.
Which is a man who gives up worldly stuff to focus on his spiritual life. I met not loads, but a couple of babas, we call them babas, in India who were kind of the same role, although they weren't Krishna people. They would just they have really long hair, often dreaded, with beads in and stuff, and they'd be wearing robes and just sort of wandering around, generally smoking a lot of hashish and, living a very aesthetic life with no belongings or anything, just a pair of flip-flops and, I literally got invited into a Baba's cave and he made me tea on a little pan it was amazing.
I didn't know really that you could still do that. So if I went to, how did you manage that? I read this book called The Journey Home.
We were hiking in the foothills of the Himalayas near, I can't remember exactly where it was, near Manali, I think, which is a little town up there somewhere. Just wandering about, and there he was, waving to us, and we went over and said hi, and my hiking buddies were all wearing hiking boots, but me being, as usual, completely unprepared, I was just in flip-flops. So he was like, oh, come into my cave, and I just slipped off my flip-flops, and the Baba slipped off his flip-flops, and we went and sat down, and everyone else was fussing with doing their laces. Aww. And the two of us just sort of sat there rolling our eyes at these Westerners with their big old boots when we were marching around the Himalayas just in flip-flops. Yeah. There was a bit of a language barrier, so we didn't have much conversation, but just chuckling and, saying strange things. I don't think it was him. I think it was another Baba who told us you have 5 chances and 5 rolls of the dice and 5 fingers. And that was his message.
I don't know what that means.
But it's just it's a lifestyle that you don't really see. I haven't seen it really anywhere else, of people who just nope out of society. And it's generally they do it when they're a bit older. Often they've already had a family. I guess it's kind of like what the Buddha did, you know? He was just like, no, not for me. I'm going to go and sit under a banyan tree.
In the West, it seems like such a novelty. And I was just saying how I read this book, which was recommended to me when I was there, called The Journey Home, which is basically a story of a guy. Long story short, he finds Prabhupada, but he goes throughout, like from the States, he travels to India. This is back in the late 60s, early 70s maybe. And, you know, that kind of journeying that you have to do like on land to get to India is first of all insane. And then when you're there, it sounds like such a magical place with these, people living in caves. And he lived I don't think he lived in a cave, but he lived on like a rock for a bit, effectively. Anyway, it seems like such a novelty to us, but it's so common there.
I think part of it is just climate related. Like, it's very hard to be homeless in the UK because the winters are really, really hard. And you see bigger populations of people who live without houses. I don't know if you'd call a Baba homeless because obviously the world is his home. But you see more people living outside in warmer places. So it does kind of make sense that there'd be more people giving that a go in India. I wouldn't say it's common, but it is a thing. It's a known thing. And generally people will donate food and stuff to people like this because they see them as part of the community and not necessarily. I got the sense that people were like, they thought them as like wise uncles. They didn't think of them as holy men really. And they weren't taking anything they said super seriously unless there was like, he was, he had really wise things to say, in which case they'd listen to him. But generally it was just like, oh, that's Bubba so-and-so. He lives over there. And occasionally we give him some food and he seems like a nice chap. That was basically it. I don't know, I haven't really looked into it much. I only have my experiences to go on. But so that's what happened to Prabhupada. He became a sannyasi. But instead of going to live in a cave in the Himalayas, he went to America. So he's about 70 years old, and it's 1965, and he heads off to the US with basically the clothes on his back to continue his mission of trying to get the word of Krishna out to the West. This is the story that is told by Krishna people. I don't know how true it is, but that's what they say. As you said, he's taking this message, which he believes, because this is what his guru has told him, comes from 5,000 years ago when Krishna passed on this wisdom. So he sees himself as part of this lineage. And he's arriving in the 1960s, where we've got in America, where the baby boomer generation are coming of age. And you've got to remember these people, I mean, there's loads of them. That's why they're called the boomers, because it's a boom in the population. And they were raised like much better than their parents were raised. They have all these opportunities. They've all been to university, not all of them, but a lot of them been to university. They're all educated and raised with, expectations of big things. And in about this time, about 1965, it's becoming clear that there are not going to be enough jobs for all the young educated people to come around. So there's like, I think this is a big contributor to the hippie movement, because there's lots of people basically with no way of having that normal life that was kind of promised to them, or not normal life, but having the life that was promised to them, and then wondering what they're going to do with themselves. And in 1965, the US relaxes it had this really actually quite discriminatory immigration policy for Asia. And in 1965, they relaxed that. And he's basically first off the boat, Prabhupada. A new immigration policy. He's allowed to come and stay and spread his message. And there's all these young people who are really interested in alternative lifestyles and what's going on. But he's part of a general wave of Indian gurus that came starting in the late 50s, really, with the Maharishi. I think we talked about him before in the meditation episode. He came in the late 50s. I don't know how he figured that out with visas and stuff, and started off the transcend meditation movement. Then you've got our favourite, Mr. Prabhupada, coming in the 65. We've got Bikram Chowdhury, who we talked about in the yoga episode, coming in the 70s. And then we've got this guy Osho in the early 80s. But they're all kind of coming from a similar background of a guru lineage in India, but they want to bring their wisdom to the West. And they start this process of transforming the ancient wisdom, or what they claim to be ancient wisdom, into something that will be marketable to US people and kind of making all these compromises and trying to find a way for it to work. I actually did my, this never comes up. I never have a use for this, but I did do my master's in post-colonial literature. And it reminded me when I was reading about this whole thing of like how we see through the lens, we see the East and Eastern religion and Eastern culture through our Western lens, and how they're looking back at us through their lens. And at this time, before the internet, obviously, and before we could, it's a really strange situation because no one really knows what to make of these two sides. And it reminded me of a book, an amazing book. It's called Karma Cola, Marketing the Mystic East, by a guy called Gita Mehta. It might actually be a woman called Gita Mehta. I don't know.
That's
anyway
really interesting. I just wanted to say that there was a great episode of The Fundamentalists not long ago where they discuss this, and like Pete Rollins is kind of saying something like it's almost like a form of like racism, that we just think that everyone in India, like from the Western perspective, that they're all like, oh, you know, isn't it amazing that they're so like spiritual and like in touch with like nature and all of this stuff. And it's like, hang on, they've got their own problems, that they also will look at the West and be like, isn't it nice that they have this? And it's just a really strange separation.
Yeah, it's exactly what I discussed in my master's, is that like the noble savage archetype is often projected onto tribal people, like, oh, they're so simple, they're so mystical. The quote I was going to read to you from Karma Cola, it's a brilliant quote that typifies this, because that's what we forget, that when we're looking at them, they're looking back at us. So it says, the seduction lies in the chaos. They thought we were simple, we thought they were neon. They thought we were profound, we knew we were provincial. Everyone thought everyone else was ridiculously exotic, and everybody got it wrong. I just think that captures it so well.
Wow.
So basically, there's a lot of misconceptions and projection, wish fulfillment. Everyone's looking for something more. So the people from India are looking for, you know, the success and the kind of, you know, the worldliness of America and all the opportunities that it promises. And the Americans are all looking for this deeper spiritual whatever that they think they can get. And it's just a really interesting, I would have loved to be alive during that time, during like the 60s and 70s. I think it would have been a fascinating time. But we wouldn't have been able to have a podcast, so. Anyway, so we end up with Prabhupada sitting under a tree, apparently, in Tompkins Square Park in New York, and chanting Hare Krishna, and hippies just come and join in. And slowly he starts this bit of a gathering. He moves to San Francisco, where he finds even more hippies, unsurprisingly. And slowly more and more people get interested in coming to his little lectures and chanting with him. And then I guess it was kind of a big deal when he hooked up with the Beatles, and George Harrison recorded a song based on their chant. It went to number 12 in the pop charts, at least in the UK in 1968. That was My Sweet Lord.
Such a good song.
It's actually a really beautiful song.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. George Harrison bought a mansion in Hertfordshire and sold it to ISKCON for £1. So he was obviously quite invested in the movement. I don't think he actually ever became a Hare Krishna, but he supported it a lot. So this was basically like the publicity that the movement needed to get going. Is really, but unfortunately at the same time, there was lots of not so holy activities going on under the banner of the Hare Krishna movement. So a big thing for them was getting money, because they needed to keep their movement going, and to build more centers, and to get more statues, and to just generally grow and make more space for praising Krishna. So that's when you start to see the people in orange robes out selling books, chanting, trying to collect funds, basically fundraising for the movement on the streets, which, I mean, fair enough. But unfortunately, there was so much pressure to get more and more money, which they actually called Lakshmi, which is like the goddess Lakshmi. Again, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this right.
Yeah.
That a lot of the devotees started gathering it under false pretenses. So they would pretend to collect for charities that didn't really exist, pretend to be in distress and in desperate need of money. The guy in the Mad After Krishna book describes how they would often wear wigs so people couldn't check that couldn't notice they were Hare Krishnas, they're more likely to give money. they'd pretend to be police officers and sort of take bribes. So they'd go up to some hippies who are smoking weed and say, "Oh, I see you're smoking weed. Give me, $5 and I won't mention it to anyone." Sell counterfeit goods. And one of my favourite scams they did was pretending to be Father Christmas. They'd dress up as Father Christmas and they would do exactly what you did, singing Hare Krishna instead of Father Christmas. So it's like a twofer, because they can collect money, because everyone loves Father Christmas and wants to give Father Christmas money. Santa Claus, I guess. But
that's awesome.
But they can still be doing their mantra. So this all comes at, like, there's fraud, there's drug dealing, there's racketeering, there's just lots of people in the Hare Krishna movement doing some very unsavory things, which is kind of unsurprising when you consider how the structure of it was all set up, with this pressure on getting more for this growing movement. But
also it was the fact that I was just going to say, like, the founding members, they're young kids. No one has any managerial skills. These are the kids who found Prabhupada. Of course things were going to happen.
A lot of them are ex-drug addicts and have found, this is kind of the same way people now are born-again Christians. They've had a very hard life and they've come into the Hare Krishna movement and they don't have that much experience with life and they're often quite vulnerable and they're the leaders. But Prabhupada's still alive. I mean, he could have put a lid on this. The other thing, all of that is not good. But probably one of the most distressing things in the Hare Krishna's history is because they needed to get those people out on the streets collecting money, they didn't want people staying at home having kids. So you were saying you could be a householder, which is someone who has a children and family. And back then you could too, but they would encourage you strongly to put your kids in like a school, a boarding school. So they sent them to boarding schools so the parents could keep up the fundraising, basically. And the boarding schools were so horrible, so badly run, that the American government sort of had a look and started making noises about how they were going to start shutting them down. So they set up schools in India where standards were lower and just sent all the kids there. And this ended up being a very bad move. So in the year 2000, 44 ex-students filed a lawsuit against the Hare Krishna movement in general. And they ended up, after, opening this up to the public, with 525 complainants. I'll give you a quote from an article I read about it. According to the suit, the children were beaten, raped, and forced to stand for hours in darkened cupboards. It also claims that the plaintiffs were sometimes scrubbed with wire wool until they bled, deprived of medical care when affected with malaria, hepatitis, and broken bones, forced to sleep in urine-ridden bedclothes, and sometimes moved to unfamiliar schools without any notice being given to their parents. The parents generally didn't know about this, but these were Hare Krishna schools, so that's pretty sad. Anyway, they ended up with a 6.5 million settlement in 2000, but spread between 525 people. I don't know how that works out. So this, I can't remember exactly when it was, but Prabhupada is realizing that he's getting older and he's not going to live forever, so he needs to sort out what's going to happen with the future of the movement, who's going to run ISKCON. So what he does is he sets up a sort of governing body, and he nominates 11 gurus. Well, actually, this is really interesting. So on the Wikipedia, it says he nominates 11 gurus, but on the American Scandal podcast, The Krishna Murders, it says that they were actually not really supposed to be gurus, they were just supposed to be leaders. So the difference would be a guru would be literally Krishna, it'd be like a conduit for God, whereas a leader would be someone just teaching Prabhupada's message. So there seems to be a bit of discrepancy there, I'm not sure. But anyway, he sets up these 11 people. And I have my big book of cults. It's actually called The New Believers. It's just a big black hardback book. I've talked about it before on the podcast. It's a brilliant reference book. So I flicked through that to get an idea of the Krishnas. They were in there. So, I mean, anyway, we'll get onto the question if they're a cult later. But one of the things that the guy who wrote The New Believers said is that the death of a leader is a crucial movement in all new religious movements. And new religious movements is the term that people like him, religious anthropologist types, use instead of cults. It's more respectful and, more accurate to what they are. So when the leader dies, there's 4 scenarios that can play out in these groups. So things either stay the same under new management, which I guess is what Prabhupada is hoping will happen, or they dissolve because no new management can be found, or they change and the teachings are reworked under new leadership. The example the guy gives in the book is when Jesus dies and then the Apostle Paul comes along and his interpretations sort of become the prominent teaching of the sort of the growth of the Christian religion, or a schism occurs as two or more groups vie for their interpretations to be considered canon. So that's like what happened in Islam with the Sunni and the Shiites. So he wanted the first option. Prabhupada wanted his teachings to carry on just under new management. But the problem with that sort of system is what happens when the teachings become outdated, and who has the authority to challenge the text. If you don't nominate another person to be a guru in your stead, then you just have to keep teaching the same thing forever, and inevitably it will become outdated. Anyway, among these 11 gurus or leaders or whatever you want to think of them, there are some really unsavory characters. I mean, like you said, these are just kids basically, and they don't really know what they're doing, but also they don't seem like very nice people, many of them. I'm sure some of them were lovely. But so a couple of them stepped down after having affairs with teenage devotees, which, is not
standard practice
anyway. But yeah, not that surprising. It's kind of like a religious thing. It's one of their things. But there's 3 guys I want to talk about specifically of those 11 who turn out to be really bad eggs. That might be a bit of an understatement. So there's Jaya Tirtha, James Edward Immel. He was based in London. So he was suspected of taking drugs, which he was a drug addict before he joined. And the General Council cracked down on him and said, you have to take a vow of abstinence because you're out of hand. So he left ISKCON. He formed a splinter group teaching like his own version of it until one of his disciples beheaded him for sleeping with his wife. So, yeah. And there's a really like evocative description of this guy who's like devoted his life to this guy he saw as a guru, and then he finds out he's sleeping with his wife, and he just, rage, chops off his head. He just really wants it to make sure he's completely dead, basically. And then he's found holding the head. So that's one guy. Then there's Hans Carey, a German guy living in America. He was head of the Berkeley Temple. So he started stockpiling guns because he was a bit worried about the apocalypse coming. And he thought we have to sort of defend ourselves against the corrupt world. And he also thought that violence is fine if it's done in the name of Krishna. And I read this a lot all over the place. Like, violence is fine if it's done in the name of Krishna. This is fine if it's done in the name of Krishna. A lot of stuff excused. He also had this idea. Did you hear the word karmi?
Yeah.
When you were there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's normal people who aren't Krishnas, right? That's what they call
Yeah, we're like trapped, we're like caught up in the material world.
Exactly. So the idea was karmis aren't really people like us.
Oh,
this was
no.
his idea.
Yeah.
So he, unsurprisingly, with that sort of philosophy, went on a shooting spree. I don't think he actually shot any people, but he shot up the windows of a car dealership and a bunch of, off-license liquor store windows because they represented the material world to him, Cars, fancy cars, that's no good. Drinking alcohol, obviously, is no good. So the third unsavory character among the 11 gurus is a guy called Kirtanananda, or Keith Ham. He ran New Vrindavan, which, as you said before, Vrindavan is like the place to be in India. I think it's somewhere near Mumbai. I don't know exactly where. But they set up a new one in America, and there was a massive golden temple there. It was like a big thing. And this was Kirtanananda's basically like his own private fiefdom when he was in control. Like, he did whatever he wanted there, and people who got in his way or tried to expose him or his alleged paedophilia were killed. So there were 2 murders whilst he was there. There was one guy whose house exploded suspiciously just as he was about to expose some stuff about what was going on there. He ended up being convicted for racketeering and mail fraud, but and then another guy who was what in the American Scandal podcast, he's described as his chief enforcer. That guy went down for murder. So yeah, basically, there was sex and drugs and abuse. There were arranged marriages, which aren't necessarily a bad thing, but in a lot of these stories I'm reading were not a good thing at this time. and gurus making sexual advances towards devotees and children, and generally disregarding the rules. There are only 3 of those 11 gurus left now. Not all of them left under such horrific circumstances as I just described, but basically it was a mess. It was a complete mess.
Yeah.
Which led to, thankfully, the reform movement, which started in 1984, which is basically everyone higher up in the Hare Krishna movement going, what the fuck went wrong? And trying to understand it and stop it happening again. They increased the number of gurus, and made sure they were more responsible to the general council. So it wasn't just all this power aggregating to 11 people. And things started to change. So in 1998, they published details of all the child abuse that had happened. They were open about it, which I guess is better than you can say for the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And they tried to make changes, and things changed demographically for the Hare Krishnas after that as well. So in the UK, Hindu people of Indian origin started coming to the ISKCON temple. So many that they actually had to build a new road to get there because there were so many of them piling in. According to the Washington Post, this article, I'll link it in the show notes, the majority of devotees in the US are now of Indian heritage, not Westerners. And the only real controversy that's going on right now for them is whether women should or not be allowed to be gurus, because basically the traditionalists back in India say no, and the Westerners say, oh, go on. And there's that tension going on. But a lot of the problems do seem to have been fixed after the reform movement. But still, it's a pretty sordid history, which I knew nothing about until I started reading about it.
I would say it's not shockingly sordid, in my opinion, because people are people.
Really?
Yeah, I'm really
shocked.
I'm not yeah. But anyway, it was a good try. Good try. I will say, if you want to learn
more to shock me
about it from I watched this documentary. I think it's called it only came out a couple of years ago. It's called Hare Krishna, something about, maybe it's got a subtitle, but it really is about Prabhupada. And watching that really, it's hard not to warm to both him and the whole movement as this kind of it's so recent and yet it's so big, and the work that these people put in to make it grow. Anyway, I found the history really interesting, but they did not mention all of that crap. But it's pretty impressive that
I'll put loads of links in the show notes to articles and stuff so you can chase it down if you like. But a lot of this stuff was happening whilst Prabhupada was in control. It's not like he died and then everything got bad. A lot of the stuff was happening whilst he was head of the religion.
But I would say that he didn't, even in the documentary, it was he didn't approve of all of this, all that money stuff. He didn't know that was going on, I think, at least for the most part. I feel for a religious leader, he did pretty well at not being a total dick and messing up.
Well, I have some more examples of his dickishness, but we'll get into that later.
Okay, fine. Shall I tell you a little bit about the belief system?
Yes, please do.
So, a lot of this is just, cherry-picked from various articles, but let's start with the ultimate goal of this movement or religion, and that is love of God, love of Krishna. And I thought it was interesting that in this article it described that bhakti is not a dogma or a particular religion or belief system. It's more accurately defined using the Sanskrit word dharma, or dharma, which means the inseparable quality. Which is
a way of life, right?
Well, yeah, but it's almost the quality that makes a thing what it is. So a stone's dharma is to be hard, water's is to be wet, fire's is to be hot, that kind of thing. And for the living being, our dharma is bhakti. We exist to exchange in reciprocal love with God and to serve him with devotion. So you could have any religion that kind of teaches this principle of devotion and love as bhakti. So I think that was my point earlier about Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, and I'm sure many other paths too. So yeah, there are these different paths. I did explain them a bit, but so the other paths, as opposed to bhakti, is work for personal gain. So that's karma. That's like the karma yoga, basically. And then there's jnana yoga, which is the pursuit of knowledge, and that's one that I like the most. And I think, and then you've got like attempts at spiritual awakening through physical yoga and asanas. That's Raja. So it's believed that the best one, like, is the bhakti one, because basically it teaches us that the happiness that we pursue in this world is ultimately unattainable and unsustainable. And that, like, even if we're trying to achieve mastery through like physical yoga practice, that can't really bring us to God, because he's a person in this system, and he responds to pure love. No other approach will do. So there's lots of kind of like justification as to why this is definitely the way to do it.
It's interesting because it sounds a bit like the analysis of the situation sounds a bit like the Buddhist analysis, like life is suffering.
Yeah.
You're never going to achieve, like, your wants and desires aren't going to lead you anywhere. But the solution in Buddhism is, I guess, I don't know, meditation, or, you know, eventually getting to nirvana. But
yeah, so
the solution from the Hare Krishna's perspective is devotion.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's not so much the solution. That kind of is, but it's you will be like reunited with Krishna. So you'll basically live in a happy land with Krishna, as far as I know. But
after you die,
and that, yes, yeah, yeah, basically. But
okay.
and I think you can have it here on Earth as well. So you're like the person, the physical body could still be alive, but you know. Okay, I'm confused about that point as well, so maybe I won't speak too much about that. But the interesting thing is that the Buddha was thought of as an avatar of Krishna, and he was the one who introduced vegetarianism as like a thing. So
that's interesting. I've never heard that before. So the theory is that Hindus weren't vegetarian before the Buddha.
Well, they might have been vegetarian, but they were still slaughtering, what's it called? Sacrificing a load of animals.
Yeah.
And he stopped that. He was like, come on, guys, a little bit unnecessary now. So that was something. So the Hare Krishnas like approve of Buddha for sure. But the big difference is that this system believes that God is personal. And I found this out on like maybe the second morning I was there, because you know, we were asking some questions, and I think my Mexican friend was like saying some like interesting things about, you know, I was reading that Krishna was this, and the problem is you can have so many different takes on this, and you're talking about the same characters, but you're not talking about them in the same way, depending on what belief system within the Hindu umbrella you're going with. But anyway, in the Srimad, in their big important text, the Srimad Bhagavatam, they describe 3 phases of the absolute truth, and there's quite a nice analogy to show how this works. So, like, if you look at a mountain from a distance, we can only make out that it's, you know, it's big and it's kind of triangular, and this is like comparing God as just to Brahman, and Brahman is his personal energy, and that's basically consciousness. So that's the thing that's like everywhere. It's like light from the sun. Yeah, so that it comes from God.
Okay.
It's part of it, but it's not necessarily him. And then as you move closer to the mountain, you start to see the mountain's characteristics. You might see the color of the foliage. And this is like compared to understanding God as within our hearts, as paramatma, or the super soul. So I was like, yeah, I'm with you on this. I believe in consciousness. I actually believe in souls too. And then we get to the final part when we're on the mountain, and we can really explore its soil, its vegetation, the animals. And this is like understanding God the person, or Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is the source of Brahman and Paramatma. And it's therefore, it's all of them, but that's like the peak. That is like the Godhead, is the personal God. And this is the part that, you know, I just really couldn't get behind. I mean, one of my questions to this woman who came to teach was, so if it's a person, like, what's it made out of? And she's like, oh, it's spiritual. It's like it's consciousness. And I'm like, but isn't that the first one? Isn't that Brahman?
Yeah, that's not a person then. If it's made out of spirit, then that's like a ghost or a... Yeah, that's not a person.
Yeah, it's like, apparently we just can't comprehend it. So there's that, which is like an explanation for a lot of things, you know, like you just can't comprehend it. So
that's so frustrating. I hate that.
So annoying.
We come to this point a lot in these topics we discuss, and you just ask so many questions, and they're just like, "Oh, well, you'll never grasp it with your human mind." Like, well, okay, fine.
Yes. The thing is, he does also come to Earth in like a more physical form. So in 1486 CE, came to Earth as Lord Chaitanya. And actually acted as his own devotee. So Krishna is like pretending to be a devotee. And, you know, Chaitanya...
Well, that's kind of like Jesus, though, isn't
Completely.
it? Like, Jesus was God, but he was also Jesus.
It's so Jesus-y. Yeah. And I find this really interesting because, you know, 1486, the Christian church is like well up and running now. Of course somebody gets some inspiration. And, you know, I said earlier, I think I was starting to talk...
Or maybe both religions are inspired by something earlier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a nice idea as well. And it's, so like I said, it's because I think we were talking about the origins of these texts earlier. So it's believed that Krishna gave us the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And we're unsure of the date of the Bhagavad Gita, but it's likely the 5th century to the 2nd century BCE. So that's before Christ. And Lord Chaitanya came to show us how to live by Gita's teachings, like I said, 1486. As for the Srimad Bhagavatam, you have some people saying it's 1,500 years old or something like that, but still CE. And then other people like Prabhupada will have argued it's 5,000 years old. So that's like a big difference. Anyway,
everyone wants their religion to be the oldest.
Right, and I'm a bit like, who cares? I like the fact that the Hare Krishna movement is so young and it's like, it's a collection of a bunch of things, and who really cares where it came from, especially if it can help you live a better life. And I mean, I will argue my case for the perks of this in a bit, but the other thing is that spiritual transcendence is difficult in this present age. So I don't know if you know this, Rebecca, but we're in the Kali Yuga, or the Kali age. And I thought that was interesting. You mentioned that guy who went on this shooting spree. Like, maybe not him. Who was the one who was like stockpiling weapons?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few of them did, actually, now you mention it. But yeah, that was exactly his philosophy. Like, everything in this world is shit. We're never gonna... This is end times, basically.
And it's really driven home in these texts. Like, the Kali Yuga sucks. Like, we live shorter lives. I mean, apparently things were really good in these other eras. But the perk... Sorry, I keep saying the word perk. But the advantage of this is that Krishna, as Lord Chaitanya, goes easy on us. He has made it quite easy to attain pure love of God simply by chanting his holy names as the Maha Mantra. So that's
because we've already got it hard enough living in the Kali age. So
right. I mean,
he's going to throw us a bone.
Yeah. So that's kind of where that mantra, the 16-word mantra, comes from. It's around that time, it's believed. And I thought it was interesting that it's to be chanted in the mood of a baby crying for its mum. I find this incredibly difficult. Oh. No, I don't find that cute. I find that like terrible.
Really?
It's like I just can't imagine it being a nice way to be called, but then I'm not a parent. So
but you're seeing it from the perspective of the parent. I was seeing it from the perspective of the
child. Who's distressed.
Like, there's something very pure about that yearning, like the yearning for a parent, the yearning to be loved, all that.
Oh, that's cute. But as a kid, I mean, if I tried to flash back, I was just being a brat every time I cried. I mean, it's like, you're distressed. There's nothing good about that. What I prefer is to sort of be in a more appreciative mood. And I find that that's actually really, for me, that's like a more positive state. And there is some science to suggest that, like, the mode of gratitude is like a pretty happy place chemically, I think, for our brains to be.
Oh yeah, I've read studies about that. That does seem to be supported. Like, if you do gratitude practice, like taking time to think about the things you're grateful for, then at least you will self-report as being happier.
Yeah.
I mean, or like any study that's based on self-reported data is a bit dodge, but it does seem, you're right, there is some backing for that idea.
Yeah, and so also the thing that kind of grates me a little bit is that it's not totally clear what the words all mean. Like, obviously, they're all Krishna, obviously. But within that, it's like Hare is potentially Krishna's number one woman, who is Radha. It's like another name for her. Potentially Vishnu as Hari, who is like Hari with an I, who is like, the preserver of life, he who removes illusion. I prefer the Radha one because this is the idea that it's kind of Krishna's like creative potential or his Shakti energy. It's, I guess, that vibe, which is quite nice. Okay, so obviously Krishna is Krishna.
The Shakti vibe.
Shakti vibe, we like that. Krishna is just like the all-attractive Supreme Personality of Godhead. That Supreme Personality of Godhead thing, I think Prabhupada coined that term, which I thought was interesting. And then Ram comes from either Balarama or Balaram, Krishna's first expansion, which I thought was, sorry, I should explain that. First expansion on Earth.
Yes, please do.
So I actually can't. That's just like, they kept using that word expansion, and I was like, it's just like, I mean, it's his avatar. It's just like the version of him. But he came a week before Krishna. He's Krishna's older brother. So like in the stories you read about Krishna, I think Balaram is meant to be his older brother. And when I was at the Golaka Dham, Balaram, it was his birthday like a week before Krishna's. So it was a smaller birthday. He's clearly like less of a big deal. But apparently they're identical. So that's the kind of thing you hear a lot. They're the same but different. That is like, is an explanation for so many things that, again, it drives me mad because it's really hard for the black and white mind to see something as the same and different. But also that could maybe...
I mean, it's a contradiction.
Yeah, and there are so many of those. But it could also mean Ram as in this earlier avatar of Krishna. And if you've ever heard about like Sita and Ram, I mean, in my yoga teacher training, we chanted this mantra, which is just like Ram, Ram, Sita, Ram. And like people were bawling, like they were having really emotional responses to it, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, we don't really know what it means. It doesn't matter because it's all Krishna and everything's Krishna. So that's it. I think I explained the chanting itself.
Please explain what's on your forehead right now.
Oh, that's my tilak. Thank you for noticing. So this is okay. So I was trying to do a bit more research on this, but it's really hard to find. I didn't find good information on this particular style of tilak. It's a marking you see in multiple like varieties of, Vaishnavism and like all of these other different deity worshipping religions. Somebody told me, though, I thought it's more interesting to share what I was told when I was there, was that it's like a form of protection. And, you could get protected from like the bad spiritual vibes. And, a devotee is saying that to me, and I'm kind of thinking, do you think I'm the bad spiritual vibe? Like, I probably am. Like, if anyone's muddying this up, it's probably me. And it's this idea
We should describe this for people who are not following us on Instagram and can't see it.
Yeah, but you should find it on Instagram as
it's
well.
Like it's not a bindi.
No, but it's similar, but it's different. It's like meant to be so that the sort of a loop, it's like an extended U. So imagine you drag a U all the way down. It's that kind of like loop. Not loop. What would you call it? What's the word for that?
Yeah, it's it looks like a gardening fork or something with the bit that you hold onto goes down onto the bridge of your nose, and the spears of the fork go up onto your forehead.
Yes,
and it's gold. Is it gold? It's kind of shiny.
It's like it's really just like a sandy color, but like it's made from clay. It's like some kind of spiritual clay. But basically, that top bit is meant to be the Lord's foot. I guess you can see it as like the bottom of the foot, because the Lord's lotus feet are kind of a big deal as well. And every time the word lotus feet is said, I'm imagining somebody walking around with actual lotuses for feet, which is weird. And the bottom bit is like a tulsi leaf, so that holy basil. I think it's one of those leaves. I think when I look at it, I see like a stag or like some kind of deer with horns. which
Yeah.
I thought was pretty
I'm
cool.
thinking like a trident. I've seen lots of pictures of I think Shiva mainly actually holding some sort of trident.
Well,
that's what it made me think of. And I saw lots of people in India with these markings on their heads. I don't know which deity they were representing. I don't know if they were representing one in particular, but yeah, it's quite common.
The Shiva one is different. That's like horizontal stripes and maybe with a dot in the middle. So that they're all different. I guess part of that is like denominating, like, you know, who are you following? What's your cult? And somebody else said, like, it's something like it distracts you so people don't look directly into your eyes and, like, you know, steal your soul. It's something for people to kind of like focus on that kind of gives you that sense of protection. Yeah, I didn't find that on Wikipedia. But
I use my cleavage for that.
Exactly. That's all we need. So, yeah, that's the tilak. Where was I? I talked about the mantra. Oh, stages of development as a bhakta or devotee. So you start by having an interest in spiritual advancement and, you know, a suspicion that maybe these material pursuits won't bring you happiness or perfection. Check, right? Check.
Well, that describes you. Yeah.
Well, maybe not so much you, but okay, yes, check. Then you associate with people who are advanced in bhakti. Check, I've just done that. And so in the next stage, you become initiated by an elevated spiritual master under whose instructions one begins to practice devotional service. I am interested in this, but I have not found my spiritual master yet. So there's that.
And who would that spiritual master be? Would that be like the head of the group you were staying with? Was there someone in that role?
I don't know if he could have done that. Maybe. Were there people there? I was trying to kind of ask that, but it also felt a little bit like I never really wanted to ask that because it always sounded as if, oh, so what, you've just got here and you're looking for your spiritual master, punk. Like, I really just didn't want to ask that question.
Yeah.
But we did have some people. Thing is, guests do visit, so Amila could have been one. Like, Amila would have been great because I like the cut of her jib. But I assume you have to kind of like do certain things. I think you would have to prove that you were actually making a genuine effort and you were chanting like the 16 rounds a day. So you know, it doesn't actually sound, the practices themselves aren't that elaborate, and I think it's also recommended that you do a course. So you can go to Bhaktivedanta Manor, that's that manor in England that George Harrison sold to them for £1. And you can take courses there. So that is definitely recommended. But I actually think, you know, if you met somebody and you were genuinely like, please initiate me, they would probably do it. So here are some of the 5 most powerful bhakti practices. To chant the Maha Mantra, like I said, minimum 16 rounds a day. To hear and discuss the Srimad Bhagavatam. So again, that was fun. We did that. To offer services to the deity at home or in the temple. This is the one that I struggle with. And I discussed this with some other people and even some hardcore devotees. That's their least favourite part. And I think it's because from the Western point. Yeah, and I think because from the Western point of view, we do find it a little bit weird to be like dressing up these dolls in little costumes and giving them flowers and like literally putting them on a swing to swing them and cool them down as like a festival thing. It's kind of weird and foreign to us.
Yeah.
The other things are all really nice, like obviously to associate with the Lord's devotees, and to live or at least visit holy places connected to Krishna. Again, I like to travel, fine. One thing I was just going to mention there, which just reminded me that, you know, you were talking about how the karmis are like Untermensch compared to the devotees. Throughout this, like, I'm reading this at the moment, and like I'm only in the first canto or whatever of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they're just saying constantly, like, Krishna loves everyone equally, but he likes the devotees most of all. And like that keeps coming up. And I'm a bit like, for it, and you could say from a spiritual perspective, no, like you just don't understand, like he really does love everyone equally. But I really think that people don't see it that way, and people will take that to mean if you're not a devotee, you're like scum. So yeah,
maybe that's why that those people were standoffish with you.
Yeah, sure, of course. Like literally, I think that would be a big part of it. So here are some of the advantages of being a devotee. You become free from all material attachments and habits that bind you to this maya, this illusion. You get unshakable faith that you're part of something bigger. You get spiritual ecstasy. And finally, you awaken to pure love of Krishna and get to see him face to face, which apparently people really want to do, and live with him happily ever after. I am very interested in the being free from all material attachments. And one of the things that I have already started to experience is like, it's definitely given me a bigger reminder that like we are not our bodies, we're not like this everything's temporary, and there probably is more to life. I say probably as in I might as well believe that because I think it's the best thing for me to believe. And you do feel a bit less attached to all of the things. Whereas
I think being less attached to like material possessions sounds good, but if the material world includes all your friends and family who are not yet in the group, then that doesn't sound so good.
Sure, and it does say, you know, I was just reading last night, literally, about this kind of idea that you should leave your family if they're not on board. Like, basically, you know, that's really the. Anyway, I'm not for that. However, I do still think you could apply the non-attachment thing to people. I do think that's a good thing. I think that's like a really, really important thing. You should apply the non-attachment thing to everything.
What you mean? Don't cling to people?
Yeah. Or like not. I mean, God, you only have to look at like even personal development stuff will tell you this, because it's like if somebody isn't acting in a way that I want, I'm going to be upset by that. Whereas if that stops being important, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I always find this difficult, and I think this has come up at a few different points in our conversations, because I think obviously there's some truth to the idea that you can't control other people and you can't let other people's, you know, whatever they're up to, like impinge too much on your own happiness. But I also think that we are human beings and we're a social species and we live in community with other people. And I think it would be unrealistic and probably not very good to not be invested in the people in your life. I think because that's what relationships are, aren't they? You're invested in people and in ongoing conversations like this conversation. I'm invested in you. I'm invested in this conversation. I'd be super bummed if you wanted to stop. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's good and bad. Obviously, it's like, it's a risk because you're giving over part of your personal happiness and whatever to another person. But in that risk, there are big rewards. Like, I mean, this is a classic thing people talk about with marriage, isn't it? Like, when you get married, you forego all others, in theory, and, you know, you commit to being with that person and building a life together, which is, you know, you're kind of giving them your heart up to do with what they want. But by doing that, you get this really deep, amazing pair bond relationship that is supportive and, you know, wonderful in many ways. So it's like there are pros and cons. And I think this very simplistic thing of like being completely attached to the material world and everything is about other people and all your possessions and stuff, that's obviously bad. But being completely non-attached, I think, is not good for most people either. So, yeah, maybe just it's good to think about it so you become more aware of where you exist on that spectrum.
Yeah, I've got to say, and I don't think it's a black and white thing. I don't think it's practicing complete... Actually, and maybe actually, no. This might be practicing... suggesting that you practice complete non-attachment and the only thing that matters is Krishna. And that's definitely not how I want to live. I do want to have some kind of... at least some interest in what's going on. And... The thing about, one thing that I read was, let's say we're talking about service, because a lot of this is to do with serving Krishna and like dedicating everything you do to Krishna, which again, it feels kind of nice to, even with the prasad thing, I know I was kind of making fun of it, but it is actually really nice to sit down and be like, oh, this meal has been cooked with love. And it has actually, we've taken the time to maybe like say a prayer before eating it. And like all of that feels like it lends some kind of meaning to life. But one of the things that was said was serving just people in the world. Actually, I think I asked this in class one day. Like, can I serve somebody else? Even if it's in the name of Krishna, like, can I help my atheist friend, like Rebecca, And they're like, no, it kind of doesn't count. Like, really, you want to be serving devotees, which is really, like, sucks. I mean, it's fine. Like, it's nice.
I was going to bring this up later, but this is exactly what I heard as well. This kind of like, I guess I was thinking of it as like separatism.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to do good things for the group. And in fact, Prabhupada said that doing things like, you know, helping someone on the side of the road, or, you know, donating money to a charity, or any of those things are actually bad things to do, because it may seem like you're helping, but actually you're only helping them exist in the material plane. And you'd be much better off just chanting Krishna. And I think that's a really dangerous message, because, you know, as much as people might want to exist on the material plane, we do actually exist in physical bodies, and we need to help each other out. And our, you know, our actions have impacts on other people. So
I will defend that, because I mean, I think, yes, that is one interpretation of that. I think I'd like to think part of what Prabhupada was saying is that still serve people, but at least you might as well also be chanting Hare Krishna. Like, don't just do it with this kind of intention of, at least, like, if they hear, because a big part of this is like, even hearing the name, you can actually become like enlightened, you know, just from hearing these words. So at least give people a chance to get closer to Krishna. Don't just help them on a material level. So maybe there is something to that. If you're like really into this, I can kind of see how people also believe that too.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously the book I was reading, the Paul Ford book, the Mad After Krishna book, is biased because he had a very negative experience with the Hare Krishnas. But he was referencing the Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is the version that's been translated by Prabhupada. Yeah. And he was referencing that and saying it's not only not good to, you know, open hospitals, comfort crying, Kami children, help change flat tires, all those sort of things. It's not only not good, but it's actually sinful because it's not directed at the soul within. But I don't know how accurately he's quoting. It'd be interesting to hunt that down and find out what exactly he's referencing there. I'm not saying that's how they practice today, but that idea of focusing on Krishna above all else, I think is like, it's probably dangerous to focus on anything above all else, but especially something which we're not even sure is real.
Yeah. Again, like, there are so many bits of this which I think are so helpful, but there is such a lot of stuff which is either culturally irrelevant or like in our context, like just modern day living, it doesn't make any sense. And a lot of concepts that, like, especially when you transplant them, I mean, my suggestion there was from the east to the west, but again, maybe I'm doing that kind of weird racism thing. But it's this idea that we kind of can't grapple with them in a constructive way, and we do end up thinking things like everyone is scum apart from devotees, which is crazy. And anyway, my biggest takeaway, I think, was there was a lot about like helping to manage desires, because let's say if you are somebody who doesn't have like somebody significant in their life, like, you know, there are some people who they have just been let down by the world, and they're just focused on like, how can I find happiness? And like, they try all of these things, but we know that there actually isn't anything that's going to bring us lasting happiness. And maybe you'll get like glimpses of it, but everything comes with this kind of struggle that ultimately we can't ever achieve that happiness that we dream of. And one thing that I think is interesting is that, and this is also based on a Pete Rollins idea, is that we desire to feel the desire of the objects we desire. I think it's that memetics concept as well. Do you know much about that?
Whoa, that's a head fuck. Okay, no, we desire to tell me that again. We
desire to. Basically, we desire the desire of the object we desire.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I can't remember the term for it.
No, I thought it was that guy, Rene Girard talks about it, But
yes, exactly. Yeah, I can't remember what he called it, but I know exactly what you mean. So if you see someone else wanting something, you want it too.
Exactly, stuff like that. And that's a great theory. But if that object is Krishna, we only win, because basically, if we're trying to please Krishna, we don't get to decide if he's satisfied or not. We'll probably never know if he's satisfied or not. Let's face it. So our hopes are never shattered. Like, as opposed to if you try to please your mum or your dad because you're trying to get that job and you want to look good in somebody else's eyes, and maybe they're satisfied or not satisfied. But at least with Krishna, either you don't know, or something good happens to you and you think he was satisfied. So the result of that is that we constantly get to improve our service, and that is actually going to give us like ongoing meaning and satisfaction throughout life, because serving Krishna is kind of like never-ending satisfaction, apparently. And in the process, like, it's going to help everyone else, because it's hard not to help other people when you're trying to please Krishna. Let's say you're cooking for Krishna. What are you going to do with all that food? You're probably not going to throw it away. You're probably going to help to feed other people as well. So I feel like it's a kind of good way of acting psychologically. And that probably didn't all make so much sense because I'm not good at explaining these things. But I just think...
No, I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of state of mind that you can put yourself in that could be quite satisfying. Although I think you'd get, like, if you slipped up and made a mistake, like you had some illicit sex or some caffeine or whatever, then wouldn't you think, well, Krishna's probably not that pleased with that?
Sure, but it's like, then you try again tomorrow. You never get like somebody who's like yelling at you for it.
You never get thrown out.
No,
or,
no.
Well, you do get thrown out, because some people did get thrown out, didn't they? Some of those gurus got thrown out for illicit sex.
Yeah, fair enough. But Krishna won't throw you out, as far as I know. It's not like... one thing I didn't get to discover is what's the deal with like hell and punishment. All I know is that there is obviously like reincarnation and karma. So bad actions will have some kind of consequence, and you don't really want to get reborn as...
So what happens? You don't know what happens to us karmis when we die. If all the Hare Krishnas get to...
No, you still get you keep reincarnating as other like shit things.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's pretty much it. I think that's all I've got on the beliefs. I'm sure I'm missing out a bunch of stuff because it's a lot. But
it's a lot. It's a complicated system. I'm having trouble getting my head around. I was having trouble getting my head around. But the big question that kept coming up when I talked to people about this, when I said my podcast partner is off in Germany living with Hare Krishnas, is this a cult?
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay. Solved. Yes.
I don't think it is. And shall I go through a few of the ideas that I have about this? So one of them is there is no...
Okay, yeah.
There's no living leader, and the hierarchy is distributed. Okay, so
that's exactly what they did. They specifically tried to distribute it more when they did that reform movement.
Yeah, and like it was funny because even the leader or the president of our place, I mean, this is the guy I spoke to on the emails, just the most, I mean, very charming, Swiss, definitely not a cult leader. Like, there was none of that culty vibe.
Oh yeah, cult leaders are never charming.
No, but it's kind of like a gentle charmingness. It's not that kind of like, oh wow, just being in his presence is like, oh my god. Or, there was none of that stuff. I feel like I know a cult leader when I see them. Anyway, so as for a process or brainwashing, well, technically, I would say that no one forced any system down my throat. It wasn't like I had to go to those classes. That said, maybe the mantra has some potential to brainwash people. And I do know that even Sri Prabhupada did say something like, we are trying to wash people's brains, which I think is really clever because it's like, it's so true. It's like, yeah, we are trying to get you all purified. Of course we are. Like, yeah, of course we're trying to like get you in on this.
Brainwashing is a difficult term. I mean, I think it was coined by a journalist, Edward Hunter. He said he was describing what he meant by brainwashing. He said the intent is to change your mind radically so that it becomes a living puppet, a human robot, without the atrocity being visible from the outside. The aim is to create a mechanism in flesh and blood with new beliefs and new thought processes inserted into a captive body, which sounds fucking terrifying, obviously, but I think does that not?
No,
I feel like
it,
like completely scooping out the individualist.
The puppet part doesn't sound so good, but I do think sometimes you do have to undergo a radical brain change. I think haven't you had some of those? Like I have.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's the puppet that scares me. But I think like modern, religious anthropologists, people who study these sort of things, don't really think that it works like that. Sure. They don't think it's possible to just scoop out a person and put in a bunch of dogma. It's basically a really complex process, which involves a lot of going along with it from the person involved for whatever reason. And there's things like coercion and there's conditioning, so that's all very habitual lifestyle of getting up at a certain time and doing certain things in a certain order that will condition you into being kind of like how people get institutionalized in prison. Like you become so adapted to that lifestyle that you can't imagine anything else. And there's a lot of power of community, like we were talking about before, if you're surrounded by people who believe something. But it's a much more back and forth. It's not just like some bad guy scoops out your brain and puts in the dogma. It's much more collaborative than in the early days of cults when there were people trying to in fact, this is what happened to this Paul Hunt guy, the Mad After Krishna guy. Sorry, I keep on going on about him. Paul Ford. He got kidnapped and deprogrammed by someone because his parents were worried about him. So they employed some people to kidnap him and take him to a hotel room and tell him. Yeah, exactly.
No, that's so
but,
fucking
he
dumb.
was pleased it happened in the end. So.
Ugh.
Yeah,
God,
he's thankful that he got out.
Well, please don't set anyone on me. I mean, but I guess what listeners probably have heard is an example of somebody who's going through the process of being brainwashed. Like you can see I can see it now in reflection. It's like me comparing this to existing beliefs that feel a lot more safe. Like I can talk about the Fundamentalist podcast because you like it and like whatever. So I can like keep making these comparisons to make this stuff fit in with my existing worldview, and by doing so, like just slowly this becomes my predominant worldview. I find that fascinating.
I
So
actually think the whole brainwashing thing is kind of like it makes it easier to understand because you can just say these poor people, something terrible's happened to them. They're victims, whereas if you look at it in a more evidence-based light with what we know about human psychology, no one's really clearly a victim. It's very complicated, and there's they have agency, and it just makes it more messy and human, which people don't like.
Sure.
So they like the simple story of someone just being brainwashed.
Right, I agree, and it's also something that we just assume happens to other people and not ourselves, which is dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to economic or sexual exploitation. So, economic. Most temples, I believe, let you stay for free. Some may ask for a donation or some work exchange, like the one that I was staying at. You could stay without working, and I believe the rooms were about 25 euros. Definitely not going to break the bank. And I think you get, food included maybe. However, I did read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it does say that you're meant to give 50% of your wealth to Krishna. But then I was thinking about that and I was like, well, some people have to give that amount in taxes at least. So, I'd rather give money to Krishna than to the government. And I will say that I think unless you can't sustain yourself, I mean, no one's against you making money to feed yourself and your family. That was emphasized a lot as well.
This, I don't know if you've got this on your list, but one of the things that I kept reading when I was reading around what the definition of cult is, because it's such a vague definition, no one really has it clearly. And every book you pick up that is supposed to tell you about cults, they just say, oh, well, no one really knows, it's too difficult to say in the first paragraph. But one of the things that kept coming up was the idea of recruiting under false pretenses. And this is something that I got the impression, and maybe it's not the case anymore, but at least in the past, that when you became a proper devotee, you were expected to give up all your material belongings and give everything to the movement.
It's like
but maybe they've changed.
There are
rules.
multiple stages, and no one's going to force you to become the next thing, even though I can imagine you're actually it probably is still your ego who would want to, which is kind of weird because it's meant to be like a. Anyway, I can see how it would be a slippery slope. So that's kind of like,
it kind of reminds me a little bit of other religions where they tell you one thing to start off and they're like, well, actually it's like this. Well, actually, the other thing that was like that with the Hare Krishnas was at first you get told that Jesus is like, he's cool, don't worry about it, you can still love Jesus, he was a pure devotee, there's no conflict in worshipping him as an aspect of Krishna. And then later you get told, oh, actually, the Bible is just this teaching designed for primitive desert dwellers, it's not worth looking at. And then even later you get told that all other religions apart from Krishna consciousness are atheism because there's only one God, Krishna, and everyone else is equally corrupt.
I wouldn't be surprised by any of that. That would make a lot of sense. And I can imagine if I was to take this on seriously, there might be this nice honeymoon period. But I would like to think that I would start questioning things. And I think people do. The problem is, we get invested in things and it's hard to back out. So, this is...
Especially when the people are so nice. Like you're describing this really lovely community.
Yes.
Do you want to give it up just because they, misrepresented their views on Jesus in the first couple of weeks? I don't know.
Especially if, like, let's say, because the underlying truth about the material world being ultimately unsatisfying, I think, especially if you still believed that, which I think is quite hard to shake once you, like, really feel it, I think then it's like, well, how do I return to the real world after I've lived in this, like, life where everything's taken care of for me? That, I think, is potentially very dangerous.
Yeah, that's kind of the institutionalism that I was talking about. Like, it's actually, it's quite scary suddenly having to find your feet. I've read a few accounts of people who have left cults, and that is a really difficult process. Like, how do I start having a life again? I mean, how do I get practical stuff? Like, if you've been in a cult for 20 years, how do you find a job? Yeah. You can't put that on your CV, can you?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Thinking about Kimmy Schmidt or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say that in my experience, lots of questions were encouraged. I didn't feel, maybe it was because I was on the outside, it was easy for me to ask questions. But maybe once you're in it, it becomes harder. It's potential.
Did you come across this this rule against mental speculation?
Well, again, that would be like so mixed. I was never really sure where people stood on that because at one point it's kind of like, it's a waste of time. It's kind of like, that's not the route to Krishna. Really, the route to Krishna is just through the heart, through devotion. So there was that element. But then in other bits, you kind of find out that actually that's a big part of it. You're meant to be like reading about this stuff and discussing it and
I think it's kind of weird because I was trying to understand, because I saw this listed. Actually, I saw it in the 4 rules, so it was like it was kind of batched with gambling. It was no gambling or mental speculation. I was like, what's mental speculation? So I got to Googling, and I found this quote from Prabhupada. He said this on one of his morning walks. He used to go on these morning walks and people record everything he said. So he said, mind is also considered as one of the senses, the chief senses, you see. So because it is sense, it is imperfect. So by mental speculation, we cannot have into right conclusion by mental speculation. Those are simply speculating on mind. They can make some progress to a certain extent, but they cannot reach the ultimate goal. It is not possible by mental speculation. Neither is it possible by direct evidence. The only possible evidence is authority. Authority. Just like yesterday, or so I gave you that example. And I was like, well, who's authority? Oh, that's convenient. It's you. And all the books you wrote.
Yeah.
So I think what he's saying is, he's not saying you shouldn't think and you shouldn't doubt, but you should subordinate your thinking to the authority, which is belief in Krishna consciousness. So you don't ask if something's true. You don't ask if it's true that Krishna consciousness exists or whatever. You consider how it's true. And I just thought that's, I think that's really bad.
Well, I would say it's a mark.
All religions like to sort of discourage doubt, but having it that blatantly said, like, you're not allowed to question Krishna and me, basically, as the Godhead. That sounds a bit culty to me.
It does. But again, it's like, oh man, that's just what every religion does, because they're so dependent on faith. And I'm still like, I don't really know. I mean, it's part of me thinks like that's not the worst way to be, because like that.
Well, if the authority is right about everything, then yeah.
Right, but we can't know that. Basically, it's the problem. It's the problem of just not knowing anything, which is the problem that we're in. So you're always going to be following some kind of authority, whether it's a scientist or the newspaper or whatever it is. Then it's like, well, how am I going to make decisions? And maybe faith is a good enough tool as anything else. It's also, yeah, I don't know. It's too big to really like get into fully, but I do think there is something that's pointing to, which is saying like, books are just one way of knowing things that we can
I
just
think that's
believe
definitely
sometimes.
True. But I think I think this is the problem when we're talking about the big question: is this a cult or not? And the reason why so many books that I picked up about cults were so vague is because depending on the definition, a lot of religions would be classed as cults.
Yeah,
in fact, in the big book of cults, the Jehovah's Witnesses are in there, the Mormons are in there. So again, it's not actually called the Big Book of Cults, and he specifically says in the introduction that not everything in this book is considered cults. That's just how I use it as my reference manual. So, but I think faith is not. It might be something that enriches people's lives, but I don't think it's a good way of knowing things about the world because it's you can't check it against anything. Like the brilliant thing about the scientific method or logic or reason, it's kind of like, I mean, the scientific method sounds super fancy, but it's just like using the evidence of your senses and testing against other people's experience and coming up to sort of a rough idea, not knowing exactly what's going on, because as you say, that's impossible. We have to remain agnostic about the nature of the universe, really, but we can get a probable sense of what's likely to be true using those methods. And what's really cool about them is they're coming from all different directions. It's not just you following your heart or whatever. It's all these other different pieces of evidence that are able to piece together what the world looks like. And I think subordinating that to some dude who says, I'm the authority, you should believe what I say, is not a good idea. And I do think it sounds suspiciously culty, because one of the things that I kept reading about cults was this idea that, they have a charismatic leader, as you said, who's not accountable to anyone else. Like their word is the law. And that did sound a bit like he was saying, my word is the law.
Yeah. Yeah, because...
But that's just one point on the list,
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily make it a cult.
No. And that it feels like that would throw pretty much all religions in there too, based on that one thing.
Yeah, and I would be tempted to do that, to be honest. But there you go.
So other things about culty things, fear of the outside world. This didn't seem the case here. Though I believe, like I said, Prabhupada did encourage people to like live off the land in these kind of communal ways. I thought it was funny that Guru Haridas was saying that if you want to go into Birkenfeld, like especially if a lot of people go in there at once, because Birkenfeld is like the nearest town. It's like a small little, I think it's a village, really, small little German village. And he would say, like, wear city clothes, like wear your regular clothes. Please don't everyone arrive there in saris, which I just thought was really like funny and considerate, because I think it is hard for people to kind of accept a community like this. But anyway, you're totally allowed to go into town, but yeah, don't do your Hare Krishna thing when you're there.
Well, that's what I was thinking when you put the Instagram post up about being in Luxembourg for the day. And I was reading the book that was all about how these people are being sent out to, gather donations under illicit things. I was thinking, oh my God, is she being sent out to like collect? Is she just disguised as a karmi to go and trick people out of money to take it back for Prabhupada?
On one of the days we did have the opportunity to do, what do they call it? Oh, there's a name for it when you go into a town and
is it called Sankirtan?
That's like when you will like sing together, but I think there's another specific name for when you're actually trying to recruit people. Anyway, didn't get an opportunity to do that in the end. Something else. How hard is it to leave the place? I left early, no questions asked. Like literally no questions were asked. and they had a driver take me to the train station. Of course, like, I'm not a devotee, so they were probably like, yeah, let's get her out of here. But, you know, it wasn't like, it didn't seem hard. However, psychologically, I'm sure it can be hard, because it's hard to like ditch anything that you've believed in for a long time.
Yeah.
Followers are made aware that they're inherently perfect, right? Because there was this issue with the cults that I read, this idea of like never enough. You know, you're always trying to like reach the next level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas at one point, because there was a lecture which was like, what are all the characteristics of a good devotee? And one of them, and we asked questions at the end, and mine was like, oh, this one says faultless. And I was like, what, they're telling us to be faultless? Like, what the fuck? And I asked that, and Miller was great. She was like, actually, we're already inherently perfect. And then gave some other kind of explanation, which I've forgotten. But I stuck with that idea that, you know, it's okay. Like, it's okay if you mess up. That was the impression.
But there are
given.
levels that you work up.
Yeah, sure. And I like that. I like that there are levels. I mean, who doesn't like something to work for? Said by the...
Yeah. I think it's motivating, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think...
But you could see that as being like, you're never good enough because you've got to get up to the next level. And then every level you get, there's another level that's revealed that you have to get to.
I mean, and it does feel kind of inescapable, because that's just what humans do. Like, it's really, really, like, it just seems to be what we do. Like, even with me, I'm like, oh man, I only chanted 2 rounds today. I wish I'd done 4. It's like, you can't help but do that. So it's almost like that it's just another container for that natural inclination that we have. Yeah. So then there is deferring to the scriptures and not the leader. So I thought this was good, because in cults you defer to the leader and not the scriptures. But I really think what Prabhupada was trying to do was for you to read the scriptures, and the idea was that.
But he did write the scriptures.
He didn't write the scriptures. He wrote this interpretation, and that interpretation, in theory, like, the belief is that is just a version of his teacher's teaching, and you know, all of this can get traced back. So it's got that idea that in itself has this purity to it. The problem with that, and I did say this to devotees, it's like, yeah, but everyone, you can't strip out some kind of subjective, like even the phrases he just uses some kind of like weird English phrases that you don't normally use in English, and then devotees start using those phrases because it's in Prabhupada's books. It's like, yeah, it's you're not really just deferring to scriptures. But I do think the good thing about this is you can't just change things. We've got all of the books. Somebody isn't just making it up on the spot, which I think a lot of like the more common cults, like the truly culty cults, were doing. How about that?
I don't know, because most cults, at least, you know, they have the same thing. They say, I'm interpreting the Bible, or, you know, some of them are just getting messages from some vague, you know, spiritual presence and just making stuff on the spot. But I think most cult leaders would claim that they are part of a, you know, that they've got
higher authority,
the truth about this thing that already exists. Yeah. I think it's be much harder to run a cult just from scratch going, I've had this idea, everyone follow me and do this. I know, because I'm trying to set up a cult like that and it's not attracting many followers. It's much better to say, I've only got one. But it's much easier to say, this is the cult of the bowl, if anyone listened to our ayahuasca episode. But yeah, I do think a lot. I'm just trying to think. I can't think of that many off the top of my head, but you know, like the Branch Davidians, for example, they thought their leader, what was his name, David Koresh, thought that he had the one true interpretation of the Bible. They're one of the most famous cults. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, you're right. That is a hard one to avoid, really. We're all just taking somebody else's word for it. But isn't that life? Like, when have you ever learned something that wasn't just somebody else's take on something? And it's really hard not to be a cult.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is what we're learning.
So what about you? Dangers, recommendations?
Well, I think actually I've got a couple of worries about Parabuddha that I'll talk about, but before we leave the subject of cults, I think in a way it's dangerous to label something a cult. Because I was just thinking about this, mentioning the Branch Davidians and what happened in Waco. You know, like there was that FBI siege, or I don't know if it's the FBI, but whatever, there was a siege, and the law enforcement, whoever they were, ended up cutting off water and supplies of baby food just to like try and intimidate this group, this what they saw as a cult, and they kind of felt like they could do anything they wanted to them because they were an evil cult. So that kind of calling something a cult can be dangerous in its own right. In fact, there was in that book, in my big book of cults, The New Believers, there was a guy who was saying, like, at the time when things were going down in Waco, the sociologists of religion were like, please listen to him, talk to him, try and understand the way he's interpreting the Bible, because this just threatening behavior just makes him believe even more in all the bad things, and you're just exacerbating the situation. So I think calling these groups cults can actually be dangerous in itself. But that said, I do think there are some slightly worrying things that Parabuddha said. In fact, there's a website called Parabuddha Said where you can just keyword search for things. So I did a little bit of searching. These are all his things he said on his morning walks, which I was talking about earlier. Yeah, what did Parabuddha say? He said a few things. He had some opinions about black people. He said, that's Central Park. Nobody can walk there. I've heard from many women that they rape. The Negroes, they capture and rape. Life is unsafe, even in a civilized way of life, like New York. So what is this civilization? Because he's trying to make a point about the Kami world being corrupt. But yeah.
Well,
letting people of colour take the fall.
Just do remember that he's like a 70-year-old man from India. I mean, I don't want to excuse anything, but like culture, context.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely culture, context, but that is exactly what's stripped away when you're told that everything he says is literally true because it's coming from God.
Yeah.
So another thing he said, another thing that the Godhead said, which is absolutely true, is the homosexual appetite of a man for another man is demonic and is not for any sane male in the ordinary course of life.
Oh.
Which is why they've had a problem ongoing with how to treat homosexual devotees. I don't know what the situation is now, but back in the day, Boy George was rejected for being gay. They said, you can join, it's fine to be gay, but you have to either be celibate or marry a woman. Because, actually having gay sex is not good.
Yeah, I'm not sure about... I've got a feeling you are allowed to marry as a man here, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, quite possibly it's changed now, but this is what Parabuddha said. And then one more gem. Generally, when a woman is attacked by a man, whether her husband or some other man, she enjoys the attack, being too lusty.
Well, if she's too lusty, like... No,
Well, no, there's another quote where he has some specific thoughts about rape, which are not cool.
And again, like probably bound by culture and context.
One more gem from Parabuddha. I know I said that one about rape would be the last one, but one more. Therefore, Hitler killed these Jews. They were financing against Germany. Otherwise, he had no enmity with the Jews.
Wait, say that again? They were financing?
They were financing against Germany. It's basically that idea that was probably very popular in his time, that, the Jews were conspiring, like...
Fucking hell.
Gathering money to attack Germany in secret.
Yeah,
this is what he believed. It's, as you say, it's unsurprising of a man of his age in his time.
Yeah.
But from a godhead.
Right, well,
doesn't sound so good.
He's not a godhead. Like, he's not Krishna. He is a fallible human. But yeah, like this is the...
Well, I certainly believe he's a fallible human, very fallible human.
Yeah.
After reading those comments. But when you start treating fallible humans as if they have, like the divine word, that's how you get into a culty situation, I guess.
It's interesting because I guess this is the problem with, ISKCON itself, or like the Hare Krishna specific movement, because that is dependent a lot really on Prabhupada. If you could just take those scriptures and just do your own thing and be like, okay, I've got the principles. I'm just going to read these books. And yes, they are interpreted by Prabhupada, but maybe you learn Sanskrit, whatever. You could probably get something pretty good from this. And it's, as long as you can see Prabhupada as like a fallible human, I still think there's a lot of good you can take from this. But anyway, if you were...
I think all of these systems, I actually think all religions have gems of wisdom in them. And, you know, even Scientology probably has some good stuff mixed in with all the weird. Mm-hmm. But I think, like, the problem isn't one person. Like, I told you about those, you know, dodgy gurus who were up to all sorts of skullduggery, the 11. But the problem is the actual structure. When you have a focus on your group and reject the outside world, when you have a leader who is presumed to be the Godhead, I don't know if this is what people believe now, but it's certainly what people believed in the 70s and 80s when this was like a really big deal. Like those structures are the problem. It doesn't really matter who you've put into those. You could put the nicest person in the world in charge, but eventually their views are going to become outdated, or they're going to slip up and say something. Like maybe this comment about Hitler, about the Jews, was just something he said in passing, and then someone said, "Oh, Prabhupada, are you sure about that?" He was like, "Oh no, I know better now."
Yeah.
Who knows? But that's the beauty of being a fallible human being and being able to make mistakes and change your mind. Whereas if, for whatever reason, you've been elevated to a position of being infallible, then even the nicest person in the world says some shit every so often. Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite as much shit as Prabhupada said, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I don't know. My conclusion on the is it a cult thing is I really don't know, because I can't even get a clear definition of what cult is. But I think it certainly has many of the like red flags that would make me think this is cult adjacent.
So you wouldn't...
But then I see them also in other organized religions. So
you wouldn't recommend people to go out... I mean, is there anything you would take from this in your own life, or recommend it to others?
I don't know. I do really like mantras. I've always liked mantras. I have mantras that I sort of devised for myself that I repeat in my head when I meditate. So I do think they're really powerful. That's the main thing. And I would like to have a read of the Bhagavad Gita. As I say, I'm sort of vaguely familiar with it in that way, you know, like I've heard people talk about it, I've read interpretations, but I haven't ever read the book.
We could have a book club. We could read it to each other. That would be fun.
Yay!
Yes. Okay, we'll do that.
That would be lovely. Yeah. Let's start another podcast. Just Bhagavad Gita readings.
From
with us struggling through the pronanciations.
Oh god, it would be so horrible to listen to. But I think having a discussion afterwards with a Seeker and a Skeptic would be hilarious. Anyway,
but it would worry me if you said now, if we're just coming sort of to our final thoughts. If your final thoughts are, I really like it, I'm going to go back and I'm thinking about becoming a devotee, I would want to like have a proper sit down off mic chat with you about whether that's a good decision for your life. I would be worried if a friend said that they were joining the Hare Krishnas, not just, you know, volunteering with them for a little while, but actually joining. I would be concerned about that just because it takes over your life. And maybe there are some good things in the material world of us karmis that you shouldn't really give up.
Okay, thoughts. I had like so many really decent not awakenings, but like just revelations when I was there. Personal things. A lot to do with like various attachments, the idea of like judgment, and just there are so many like little things that it's boring for everyone else, but very useful for me. So there's that. So I got a lot from those 3 weeks. I also got a lot from living in community. I think you can learn a lot about yourself in any community. The great thing about having a spiritual center point for a community is that everyone has more of a reason to get along. And I think it kind of gives this like...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think like the community itself just, for me, worked really well, even though there was lots of like... People would openly criticize it without being specific. They would be like, oh, you know how like when a devotee pisses you off, or like, you know... So everyone knows that that's difficult and that it's widely discussed.
You know, like when a devotee never washes their socks and then they just hang them up on the radiator when they get slightly damp and it stinks out the whole dorm. You know when that happens, Harry? Do you know when that happens?
I mean, that's literally it. We could do a great parody of these things. Like I said, I'm continuing these certain practices, at least until I get bored of them. The only other thing that, I might say that might scare you is, I want to go and check out some more temples. Like, I definitely want to go to Bhaktivedanta Manor, because it's like, not right on our doorstep, but it's like one of the biggest, coolest temples there are, and it would be nice to check that out. And partly, you know why?
Yeah, I'd like to go. We should go together. I'd like to check.
Yeah, actually, it would be really good. And here's my reason. I do think that Hare Krishnas are probably the best people. I mean, I've met people from other religions, and I grew up with the Catholics, and at uni there were like some really hardcore Christians, but they're just particularly nice people. So, I mean, maybe it's different. Maybe at other temples it's not the same, but at this temple I was like, yeah, if everyone's like you, sign me up. But I'm not going to sign up. Don't worry, I'm not going to sign up.
They are putting good. They are putting their best foot forward, though, as well, with you volunteers. They're not going to be dicks to you because they want you to stay.
True,
right?
True. Yeah.
Or to consider coming back. Okay, well, can I have like a solemn on-podcast commitment that if you start thinking about doing, becoming a devotee seriously, that you will not do that until we've had a discussion.
Oh my God, of course. So
face-to-face
I genuinely believe that, you are my, like, I'm just going to defer my left brain thinking to you, because and multiple times at this place I was kind of checking my thoughts against what would Rebecca say. I need like what would Krishna say on one wrist and what would Rebecca say on the other wrist. But and I had these discussions with people. At one point we were talking about like law of attraction stuff, and I just remember thinking, like, it's good to have a skeptic voice in your head, because that is really useful, and you do become kind of annoying at spiritual places because no one wants to hear that that their idea is not as true or like as agreed upon as they might think. And there is a lot of like yes-anding at a place like this. I mean, no one debated the fact that I was into astrology, and honestly, I would have welcomed somebody just saying, "Really? How does that work? Are you sure about that?" So anyway, what I'm trying to say is, like, I think it's good to have, while you are like curious about these things and you are seeking, like myself, it is nice to have like this backup voice and a person that you can defer to say like, "Hey, I'm thinking about, shaving my head. Discuss."
Please don't shave your head. Your hair is one of the best parts.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, so I'll keep it for now. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.
Okay, well, shall we finish with a chant?
Yeah, let's go for it. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I think so.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
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 Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama Rama,
Hare Rama,
Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.